Hi everyone. Great to have you here at Monkey DFIC. Get comfortable because today we're presenting the moment Luffy surpassed Whitebeard. Before we start, a gentle reminder, if you love stories like this, please like and subscribe. It helps the algorithm show our videos to more people. And now, the moment you've been waiting for. Chapter 1, The Legacy Challenge. The Thousand Sunny cut through the morning waves like it was born for it, spray kicking up along its lion figurehead as Luffy perched cross-legged on his special seat. The captain's straw hat fluttered against the string around his neck, his eyes fixed on the horizon where a smudge of green was growing larger by the minute. Flameheart Island dead ahead. Usopp called from the crow's nest, his voice carrying over the deck. Should make landfall in 20 minutes. Nami glanced up from her maps, the wind whipping her orange hair. Perfect timing. We're running low on supplies, and according to what I've heard, this island has some unique trading goods. Luffy grinned, bouncing to his feet in one fluid motion. I hope they have good meat. I'm starving. His stomach growled loud enough for everyone nearby to hear, pulling laughs from his crewmates. Jinbe approached from the helm, his massive frame casting a shadow. Luffy-kun, there's something you should know about Flameheart Island before we dock. This was one of Whitebeard's protected territories. That caught Luffy's attention. He jumped down to the main deck, landing with barely a sound despite his rubber abilities. Whitebeard's. His voice had lost some of its playfulness, replaced by genuine curiosity. Yes, Jinbe nodded solemnly. After Whitebeard's death, many of his territories have struggled. Some found new protectors, some fell to other emperors, and some. He paused, looking toward the approaching island. Some have had to fend for themselves. Robin closed her book, joining the conversation. I've read about Flameheart. They produce a rare medicinal herb that only grows in their volcanic soil. It made them valuable, and vulnerable. Which means they probably had to pay protection money, Nami muttered, frowning. Jinbe shook his head. That wasn't Whitebeard's way. He genuinely protected people who couldn't protect themselves, asking only for their friendship and occasionally supplies for his crew. He wasn't like the other emperors. Luffy stared at the island, now close enough that they could see a bustling port town nestled against green hills that rose toward a dormant volcano at the center. Unlike his usual excited bouncing before a new adventure, he stood unnaturally still. So they're on their own now, huh, he said quietly. Sanji lit a cigarette, leaning against the railing. We're just here for supplies, right? We're not looking to start claiming territories or anything. Of course not, Luffy replied instantly. That's not what being Pirate King is about. Zoro, who'd been napping against the mast, opened his one good eye. Being Pirate King is about being the freest person on the seas. But sometimes. He paused, choosing his words carefully, freedom comes with responsibilities. Luffy turned to his first mate with surprise. It wasn't often that Zoro waxed philosophical. Frankie's booming voice interrupted from below deck as he emerged wiping oil from his massive hands. We're super ready to dock. Cola reserves are full, and the Sunny's eager for a rest. Good timing, because we've got company, Brooks said, pointing his bony finger toward the water. 3 ships had appeared from around the eastern side of the island, moving fast. They flew black flags, but not the straw hat emblem. These showed a broken hourglass on crossed swords. Pirates, Jinbe said grimly. And they're heading straight for the port town. Luffy's eyes narrowed, his hands tightening into fists. Nami, how fast can we get there? Nami was already moving, shouting orders. Frankie, full cola to the paddles. Jinbe, take the helm. Everyone else, prepare for possible battle. The Thousand Sunny lurched forward with newfound speed, the soldier dock system deploying paddles that churned the water into white foam. But the pirate ships had a head start, already beginning to fire cannons toward the port. They're attacking civilians, Chopper gasped, his eyes wide with horror. Not if we can help it, Luffy said, his voice suddenly hard. He stretched his arms, grabbing the railings. I'm going ahead. Wait, Luffy, Nami started, but he was already launching himself through the air, his body rocketing toward the nearest pirate ship. Gum Gum Rocket. Luffy crashed into the main mast of the lead ship, sending splinters flying in all directions. He rebounded, landing on the deck in a crouch as stunned pirates scrambled for their weapons. Who the hell are you? A burly man with a tattooed face demanded, pointing a cutlass at Luffy. Luffy straightened up, adjusting his straw hat. I'm Monkey D, Luffy. The man who's gonna be king of the pirates. He cracked his knuckles, surveying the crew. And you're attacking innocent people. The pirates exchanged glances, then a ripple of recognition passed through them. Straw Hat Luffy. The Rookie Emperor. That bounty. Captain Vargas isn't going to like this, one of them muttered. Vargas? Luffy repeated. Is he your captain? Where is he? Instead of answering, the pirates attacked all at once. A dozen men charging with swords, pistols, and axes. Luffy didn't even bother dodging. The blades bounced off his rubber body, bullets stretched his skin before firing back, and within seconds, he'd cleared the deck without breaking a sweat. Weak, he muttered, genuinely disappointed. These weren't the caliber of pirates he'd come to expect in the New World. A cannonball screamed toward him from the second ship. Luffy caught it one-handed, the impact pushing him back several feet before he wound up and hurled it back twice as fast. It exploded against the other ship's hull, leaving a smoking hole. Hey! Luffy shouted across the water. Where's your captain? I want to talk to Vargas. Behind you, Straw Hat. Luffy spun around to find a tall man standing on the quarterdeck, having emerged from the captain's cabin. He wore a sleeveless coat that revealed heavily scarred arms, and his left hand gripped what looked like a bicento, similar to Whitebeard's weapon, though smaller. His most striking feature was a vertical scar that ran from his forehead to his chin, passing directly through a clouded, blind eye. Captain Vargas, Luffy stated rather than asked. The man inclined his head slightly. And you're the so-called Fifth Emperor. The rookie who thinks he can fill Whitebeard's shoes. His voice carried a bitter edge. I'm not trying to fill anyone's shoes, Luffy replied, his stance casual but ready. I just don't like people who attack towns for no reason. Vargas laughed, a hollow sound. No reason. This island was under Whitebeard's protection. Now I'm claiming it, same as I've claimed 6 other former Whitebeard territories. In the distance, Luffy could see the Thousand Sunny approaching rapidly, his crew ready on the deck. But this was a conversation he needed to have himself. Why target Whitebeard's island specifically? Luffy asked, genuinely curious. Vargas's face twisted with something between rage and pain. Because his way of piracy was weak. Protection. Friendship. Family. He spat the words like curses. That's not what being a pirate is about. Pirates take what they want. We're not heroes or guardians. Something clicked in Luffy's mind. You were part of his crew. The captain's eye widened slightly. How did you? Just a feeling, Luffy shrugged. Something about the way you talk about him. Like you're disappointed. Vargas's grip tightened on his bicento. I was there at Marineford. I watched him die for a lost cause. All that power, all that greatness, wasted protecting others when he should have been conquering the world. He pointed the weapon at Luffy. And now they say you're following his path. Another waste. Luffy didn't respond immediately. There was something familiar about this argument, something that reminded him of conversations with Kobe, with Smoker, with others who had their own vision of what the world should be. He didn't fully understand Vargas's hatred, but he understood having a dream, a vision that drove you forward. I'm not Whitebeard, Luffy finally said. I don't want what he wanted. I'm going to be the freest man on the sea, not the strongest or the one with the most territory. He took a step forward. But I know he was a great pirate. And attacking people who can't defend themselves. That's just being a bully. Vargas's face contorted with rage. You understand nothing. He swung the Bicento in a wide arc, the weapon's blade glinting in the sunlight. Luffy dodged easily, bending backward at an impossible angle. I understand enough to know you're hurting innocent people to prove a point. His arms stretched back, muscles coiling. And that's reason enough to kick your ass. Gum gum pistol. His fist shot forward like a bullet, but Vargas was faster than his crew. The captain sidestepped, the Bicento blade slicing through the air where Luffy's extended arm had been a split second before. You're out of your league, boy, Vargas snarled, twisting his weapon in a complex pattern. I trained under the strongest man in the world. The Bicento suddenly glowed with a faint blue light, and when Vargas swung it again, the air itself seemed to crack. Luffy barely had time to activate his observation haki, leaping high as the deck where he'd been standing split clean in two. Armament haki, Luffy muttered, recognizing the technique. Not as powerful as Whitebeard's Quake ability, but dangerous nonetheless. From the sky, Luffy could see the thousand Sunny had reached the other pirate ships. His crew was making short work of them, Zoro cutting through a mast like butter, Sanji's fiery kick sending men flying, Robin's multiple arms restraining groups of pirates. They had things under control. Your crew is impressive, Vargas acknowledged, watching the same scene. But they're not here to save you. Luffy landed back on what remained of the deck, grinning. I don't need saving. His arms turned black with armament haki, the color spreading across his chest and up his neck. And neither does that town. Vargas charged, the Bicento whirling in patterns designed to slice even a haki-strengthened opponent. Luffy dodged, countered, struck with precision. Each blow that connected sent Vargas sliding back, but the captain remained standing, his technique impeccable. You're strong, Luffy admitted during a momentary pause, both fighters assessing each other. But you're missing something important. And what would that be? Vargas sneered, blood trickling from a cut on his cheek. A reason to fight beyond yourself, Luffy said simply. Something flickered across Vargas's face, doubt, perhaps, or an old memory. But it vanished as quickly as it had appeared, replaced by cold determination. Philosophical nonsense, he growled, raising his Bicento high. The blue glow intensified, crackling with energy. This is all the reason I need. He brought the weapon down with terrifying force, aiming to split both Luffy and what remained of the ship in two. But Luffy didn't move. Instead, he raised one haki-blackened hand and caught the blade between his palm and fingers. The impact created a shockwave that shattered the remaining windows in the captain's cabin. The blue energy flared, struggled against Luffy's grip, then faded. Impossible, Vargas whispered, trying to pull his weapon free. It didn't budge. Luffy looked up, his eyes serious beneath the brim of his straw hat. You know what Whitebeard had that you don't? People he was willing to die for. That's what made him strong. With a casual flick, Luffy snapped the Bicento in half, the blade flying into the sea with a distant splash. Before Vargas could recover from his shock, Luffy was on him, fists moving almost too fast to see. Gum gum Gatling. Each blow landed with precision, targeting points that would incapacitate without killing. Within seconds, Vargas crumpled to the deck, conscious but unable to move. Luffy stood over him, not even breathing hard. Your crew is defeated. Your ships are damaged. Leave this island and don't come back. Or what? Vargas coughed, blood speckling his lips. You'll kill me. No, Luffy said, and there was something in his voice that made even the defeated captain look up in surprise. I'll tell everyone how the great Captain Vargas, former Whitebeard pirate, now attacks defenseless islands because he's too scared to face real opponents. The color drained from Vargas's face. You wouldn't dare. Try me, Luffy replied, his expression uncharacteristically hard. Then, just as quickly, his face relaxed into its usual grin as he spotted the Thousand Sunny pulling alongside. "My crew's here. Time for you to go." The port town of Ember Bay was in better shape than they'd expected. Vargas's initial cannon fire had damaged some docks and warehouses, but the people had quickly organized defenses, not their first pirate attack since losing Whitebeard's protection. "You folks handled yourselves pretty well," Frankie commented to the town's mayor, a stocky woman with steel-gray hair pulled into a severe bun. Mayor Rena nodded grimly. "We've had to learn." The first few months after Whitebeard fell were the hardest. Every pirate crew with delusions of grandeur thought they could just sail in and take over. The Straw Hats had gathered in the town square, where grateful locals were already bringing out food and drinks despite their limited resources. Luffy sat cross-legged on a barrel, devouring a leg of what appeared to be some local game bird. "So what happened?" Nami asked, accepting a mug of cider from a smiling old man. "How did you fight them off?" "We didn't, at first," Rena admitted, looking around at her people. "We paid whatever they demanded, gave them our medicinal herbs, our food, our treasures. But eventually, we realized that would be the end of us. So we started fighting back." "With what?" Usopp asked, genuinely impressed. "These didn't look like warriors." Rena smiled thinly. "Knowledge is its own weapon, young man. We learned which pirates could be bribed to fight other pirates. We learned which marine outposts would respond to distress calls without asking too many questions. And we learned that most pirates are cowards at heart, looking for easy prey." Robin nodded appreciatively. "A tactical approach. Very wise." "Necessity breeds innovation," Rena replied. "Though I must say, your arrival was fortunate. Vargas has been systematically targeting Whitebeard's former territories, and he has resources we haven't seen before." Luffy, who had been uncharacteristically quiet while eating, finally spoke up. "He used to be part of Whitebeard's crew. That's why he has that weapon, had that weapon." He grinned at the memory of snapping the Bicento. Jinbe looked troubled. Many of Whitebeard's former allies and crew members scattered after Marineford. Some joined other crews, some retired, some. He trailed off, glancing at Luffy. "Some have been waiting to see who would fill the void." "Well, they can keep waiting," Luffy said firmly, grabbing another piece of meat. "I'm not here to take over Whitebeard's job." A silence fell over the group, broken by a deep, unfamiliar voice from the edge of the square. "That's good to hear, because you're not ready for it." Every head turned toward the newcomer, a tall, lean man with a shock of blonde hair styled in a distinctive pineapple shape. He wore an open purple jacket that revealed a blue tattoo on his chest, Whitebeard's mark. "Marco the Phoenix," Jinbe said, rising to his feet with surprise and respect. Marco nodded to the fishman but kept his eyes fixed on Luffy. "When I heard the Straw Hat Pirates had engaged Vargas at Flameheart, I had to see for myself." His lazy-looking eyes scanned the group. "Interesting crew you've assembled, you all." Luffy swallowed his food and stood up, wiping his hands on his shorts. "You're the bird guy from the war. Whitebeard's first mate." His face split into an enthusiastic grin. "Your flames were awesome." Marco's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes softened slightly at Luffy's genuine enthusiasm. "Former first mate. Whitebeard is gone." He stepped fully into the square, hands in his pockets. "I've been keeping an eye on his territories when I can, but I'm just one man." "So you know about Vargas?" Zoro asked, leaning against a nearby wall, hand resting casually on his swords. "I know he served under Whitebeard for 15 years before deserting after Marineford," Marco replied. "He was never high-ranking, couldn't handle the responsibility. But he was strong, and father saw potential in him." A flash of genuine sadness crossed his face. Vargas saw strength as its own purpose, not as a means to protect what you care about. That was always his failing. Mayor Rena stepped forward, addressing Marco directly. We've heard rumors that you've been helping some of the islands. That you drove off the Bloodhound pirates from Azure Tide last month. Marco shrugged. I do what I can, when I can. But the new world is vast, and pirates like Vargas are multiplying. We could help, Luffy said suddenly, drawing surprised looks from his crew. Luffy, Nami started cautiously, we have our own journey to focus on. The road poneglyphs, laughed Tail. I know, Luffy nodded impatiently. I'm not saying we should stop that. But if we're passing islands that need help, why shouldn't we help them? He turned to Marco. That's what Whitebeard would have done, right? Marco studied Luffy for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Whitebeard built his protection over decades, Yua. He earned loyalty through consistent action and unwavering principles. It's not something you decide on a whim because it seems like a good idea today. I'm not trying to be Whitebeard, Luffy repeated, a hint of frustration in his voice. I'm just saying people shouldn't get hurt if we can stop it. A noble sentiment, Marco replied, though whether he was being sincere or sarcastic was hard to tell. But intentions aren't enough in the new world. Actions have consequences, and helping one island might mark a dozen others as targets for pirates wanting to challenge you. Luffy frowned, clearly not having considered this angle. Before he could respond, a commotion at the edge of town caught everyone's attention. A young woman was running toward them, panic clear on her face. Mayor Rena. The northern fields are on fire, she gasped, pointing back the way she had come. Indeed, a column of black smoke was now visible rising over the rooftops. That's where the medicinal herbs grow, Rena said, her face paling. If the fire spreads to the main crop. Vargas, Jinbe growled, putting the pieces together. He must have had men on the island already, waiting for a signal. Luffy was already moving, his eyes locked on the smoke. Nami. Can you do something about the fire? Nami nodded, reaching for her climatact. I'll need to get closer, but I can create rain clouds to help contain it. I'll help evacuate anyone in danger, Chopper volunteered, shifting into his walking point form. Robin, Frankie, go with Chopper, Luffy ordered. Zoro, Sanji, Jinbe, find Vargas's men and stop them from starting any more fires. The crew moved with practiced efficiency, each knowing their role without needing detailed instructions. As they scattered toward their tasks, Marco watched with undisguised interest. You command them well, he observed as Luffy prepared to launch himself toward the smoke. Luffy paused. They're my crew. We understand each other. And yet you didn't ask for their input on your offer to help protect Whitebeard's former territories, Marco pointed out. That stopped Luffy short. He looked back at the Phoenix, his expression unusually serious. You're right. That wasn't fair to them. He adjusted his straw hat. But right now, there's a fire to put out. Marco's lips curved into the ghost of a smile. There always is, Yua. With that, his arms transformed into brilliant blue flaming wings. I'll get a better view from above. See if there are any other saboteurs. Luffy nodded and launched himself toward the burning fields, his mind already racing with plans to contain the damage and catch whoever was responsible. The northern fields were chaos. Flames had already consumed nearly an acre of the precious medicinal herbs, and farm workers were frantically trying to create firebreaks by digging trenches in the rich volcanic soil. Nami arrived minutes after Luffy, immediately assessing the wind direction and fire spread. She assembled her climatact and began generating cool, moisture-laden air that rose to form dark clouds above the burning section. I need a few more minutes to build enough moisture for effective rain, she called to Luffy. Can you contain the eastern edge? It's spreading faster there. Luffy nodded and raced toward the indicated area. The intense heat didn't bother him much, he'd faced far worse in battles, but the thick smoke made visibility difficult. He could hear people coughing and shouting directions through the haze. A sudden burst of wind cleared the smoke momentarily, revealing several dark figures at the edge of an untouched field. They weren't fighting the fire, they were spreading it, using torches to ignite new sections. "Hey!" Luffy shouted, instantly furious. "Stop that!" The saboteurs turned, revealing Vargas's crew insignia on their clothing. One of them, a wiry man with a bandana covering the lower half of his face, stepped forward. "Captain's orders," he called back, his voice muffled. "If we can't have this island, no one gets its treasures." Luffy's fists tightened. "Your captain is a coward who attacks what he can't have." The man shrugged. "Maybe so. But he pays well." He reached into his pocket and pulled out something that made Luffy's eyes widen, a small glass vial filled with a viscous green liquid. "Blastroot extract," the man explained, seeing Luffy's reaction. "One vial can burn through half an acre. We've got a dozen more placed throughout the fields." He held up a small detonator. "Surrender the island to Captain Vargas, or I press this button and the entire crop goes up in flames." Luffy assessed the situation quickly. He could probably take out this guy before he pressed the button, but the other saboteurs were already spreading out, and he couldn't be sure he'd get them all in time. A flash of blue flame streaked overhead, Marco, surveying the scene. "Good. Maybe between the two of them, they could." Luffy's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of Nami's weather technique reaching full power. Rain began to fall over the burning section, steam hissing where water met fire. The saboteur glanced up in alarm, then back at Luffy with renewed determination. "Time's up," he said, his thumb moving toward the detonator button. "Gum Gum pistol." Luffy's fist shot out, aiming not for the man but for the detonator itself. His aim was perfect, the device shattered under the impact, pieces flying in all directions. The saboteur stared at his empty hand in shock. "You," he began, but Luffy was already on the move. "Gum Gum whip." His extended leg swept across the ground, knocking all the visible saboteurs off their feet in one smooth motion. As they tumbled, Marco descended from above, blue flames wreathing his body. "There are 3 more groups," the Phoenix reported, landing beside Luffy. "Northeast, west, and south corners of the fields. They all have those explosive vials." Luffy didn't hesitate. "You take the northeast and west. I'll handle the south. Nami's rain should stop any new fires from spreading too far." Marco raised an eyebrow at being given orders but nodded. "Efficient plan, Yua." With a powerful beat of his flaming wings, he launched back into the air. Luffy stretched his arms to grab a distant tree, catapulting himself toward the southern edge of the fields. As he flew through the air, he caught glimpses of the battle's larger picture. Zoro and Sanji had found another group of Vargas's men in the town, while Chopper, Robin, and Frankie were evacuating workers from the most dangerous areas. His crew was working seamlessly, each using their strengths without needing micromanagement. The southern saboteurs were more prepared than the first group. As Luffy landed among them, they immediately scattered, making targeting them all at once more difficult. One woman with knives strapped across her chest threw a vial of blastroot extract directly at his feet. Luffy reacted instinctively, inflating his body into a balloon that bounced the vial harmlessly away. It shattered against a rock, the liquid igniting into a contained inferno that quickly consumed itself without spreading. "Nice try," Luffy grinned, returning to normal size. "But I've fought way scarier stuff than plant juice." The woman snarled and drew her knives. "Then fight this." She charged, blades flashing in complex patterns designed to overwhelm. Luffy didn't even bother with hockey. He simply moved, his body flowing around the attacks with fluid ease born from countless battles. When he spotted an opening, he struck, one precise blow to the woman's solar plexus that folded her like paper. The remaining saboteurs saw their comrade drop and lost what little courage they had. They turned to run, but Luffy wasn't letting them escape so easily. Gum Gum net. His fingers stretched and interlaced, forming a giant web that caught the fleeing pirates and slammed them to the ground. As they struggled, Luffy approached, his expression uncharacteristically serious. "Where are the rest of the vials?" he demanded. One of the trapped men, clearly deciding cooperation was the better part of valor, quickly confessed. "There's a cache hidden in the hollow tree at the field's edge. 20 more vials." Luffy nodded. "Good. Now you're going to help put out these fires you started." Within 30 minutes, the immediate crisis was contained. Nami's rain had extinguished the largest fires, and the captured saboteurs had been put to work creating firebreaks under the watchful eyes of Zoro and Sanji. Marco had successfully neutralized the other groups and recovered most of the blastroot extract vials. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the damaged fields, Mayor Rena surveyed the destruction with a grim expression. "We lost about a quarter of the crop," she reported to the gathered straw hats. "It could have been much worse, but it's still a significant blow. The medicinal herbs are our primary trade good. Will you be able to recover?" Jinbe asked, concern evident in his voice. "Eventually," Rena sighed. "But it will be a lean year. And I'm concerned Vargas might return once you've left." Luffy, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, suddenly spoke up. "We caught 27 of his crew. The ones still conscious say Vargas's main ship left the area heading southwest. Probably to lick his wounds and plan his next move," Marco commented, landing lightly beside them. He had been doing aerial reconnaissance, ensuring no pirates remained hidden on the island. "Or to target another of Pop's islands," Jinbe added grimly. Luffy crossed his arms, his face set in determination. "Then we should warn them." The suggestion hung in the air, its implications clear. Marco studied Luffy closely, searching for something in the younger captain's expression. "You're volunteering to visit other former Whitebeard territories?" he asked carefully. "That's a significant detour from your own journey, you are." "Not all of them," Luffy clarified. "But if Vargas is heading southwest, there might be islands in our path anyway. We can at least spread the word, tell them to be ready." Nami pulled out her charts, checking their planned route. "Actually, there are 2 islands that would only be minor detours. Greenstone and Tidehaven. Both were under Whitebeard's protection," Marco confirmed, a hint of surprise in his voice. "Greenstone has natural defenses, high cliffs, narrow harbors, but Tidehaven is vulnerable. It's a major trading port with valuable resources." Luffy looked to his crew, this time making sure to include them in the decision. "What do you all think?" "It wouldn't be a big delay." The responses came quickly. "I'm in," Zoro said simply. "Those islands might have beautiful ladies in need of protection," Sanji added, hearts practically visible in his eyes. "I've never been to Tidehaven, but I've read they have unique medical practices," Chopper said excitedly. One by one, the crew voiced their agreement. Even Nami, usually the most practical about their route, nodded her approval. "It's decided then," Luffy grinned, slamming his fist into his palm. "We'll set a course for Greenstone first thing tomorrow." Marco watched this exchange with growing interest. When the crew dispersed to help with cleanup efforts, he approached Luffy directly. "You're an unusual pirate, Straw Hat," he said, his tone impossible to read. "Most would be focused solely on reaching Laugh Tale, not playing guardian to islands they've never seen." Luffy shrugged. "I'm not playing anything. I just do what feels right. And what feels right is following in Whitebeard's footsteps." Marco pressed, a challenge in his voice. "I'm not following anyone's footsteps," Luffy replied firmly. "I'm making my own path. But if that path crosses places where people need help, and I can give it, why wouldn't I?" Marco's expression remained neutral, but something in his eyes shifted. "You know, I came here expecting to find a rookie playing at being an emperor. Someone riding the wave of media hype after Whole Cake Island and Wano." Luffy laughed, the sound genuine and carefree. "I don't care what they call me. Emperor, rookie, whatever. Titles don't matter. To most pirates, they're everything, Marco countered. I'm not most pirates, Luffy said with simple confidence. And neither was Whitebeard, right? That earned the ghost of a smile from Marco. No, he certainly wasn't. The Phoenix looked out over the damaged fields, where town residents and straw hats worked side by side to salvage what they could. Whitebeard believed that the true measure of a pirate wasn't in his strength or his treasure, but in the bonds he formed. The family he built. Luffy followed his gaze to where his crew was scattered across the fields. Frankie was using his mechanical know-how to repair damaged irrigation systems. Robin's multiple arms were carefully transplanting salvaged herbs. Chopper was treating burns while Brook played soothing music for the workers. They weren't just helping, they were putting their whole hearts into it. I understand that, Luffy said softly, a rare moment of reflection. Without my crew, all the strength in the world wouldn't mean anything. Marco studied him for a long moment, then nodded as if coming to a decision. I think I'll stick around for a while, if you don't mind the company. See how this plays out. Luffy's face split into his trademark grin. You're coming with us. Awesome. You can tell me stories about Whitebeard. For the first time, Marco laughed, a short, surprised sound, as if it had been startled out of him. You really are something else, Straw Hat. As night fell over Flameheart Island, the fires were fully extinguished, the saboteurs secured, and plans made for departure in the morning. The Straw Hats gathered at a local tavern, where despite the day's hardships, the atmosphere was celebratory. The townspeople insisted on treating their saviors to food and drink, grateful for the intervention that had saved their livelihood. In a corner of the tavern, Mayor Rena sat with Jinbe and Marco, deep in conversation about Whitebeard's legacy and the changing landscape of the New World. Nearby, Luffy was engaged in an eating contest with Usopp and Chopper, while Zoro and Nami competed to see who could drink the most of the local specialty, a potent cider made from fireberries that grew on the volcano's slopes. I still can't believe Luffy just decided we're going to check on other islands, Nami said, her cheeks flushed from the cider. It's so not like him to delay our journey. Zoro shrugged, seemingly unaffected by the multiple empty mugs in front of him. Is it really that surprising? He's always helped people who needed it. Remember Alabasta? Drum Kingdom? Dressrosa? True, but those were always connected to someone he cared about, Nami pointed out. Rebecca, Vivi, Chopper. Maybe he's starting to see the bigger picture, Zoro suggested, his one eye fixed thoughtfully on their captain. Being an emperor isn't just about strength, it's about influence. The choices he makes affect more than just us now. Nami stared at her swordsman in surprise. That's unexpectedly insightful, coming from you. Zoro grinned wolfishly. Don't sound so shocked. I pay attention. He downed another mug. Besides, Luffy's always had good instincts about people. If he thinks helping these islands is the right move, I trust him. Across the room, unaware of this analysis, Luffy was on his 15th serving of roast boar. This meat is amazing, he declared, juice running down his chin. Way better than the rations we've been eating on the ship. It's a local specialty, the tavern keeper explained proudly. The boars feed on the herbs that grow here, giving their meat a unique flavor. It's one of our island's treasures. Treasures come in many forms, Robin observed from her seat nearby, nursing a cup of herbal tea. Flameheart's wealth isn't in gold or jewels, but in its unique resources and knowledgeable people. That's what made these islands valuable to Whitebeard, Marco added, joining their conversation. He understood that true wealth goes beyond material riches. Luffy, mouth still full, pointed his fork at Marco. Is that why so many people were sad when he died? Because he protected their treasures? The tavern quieted at this direct reference to Whitebeard's death. Even 3 years later, it remained a sensitive topic, particularly in territories that had benefited from his protection. Marco didn't appear offended, however. He considered the question carefully before answering. People mourned Whitebeard for many reasons. Some lost a protector, yes. Others lost a symbol of an era, a man who stood against the tide of the world government's absolute authority. He paused, a flash of old pain crossing his face. But those of us who served under him? We lost a father. The simple statement carried such weight that even Luffy stopped eating. The concept of a pirate crew as family wasn't alien to him, his own crew had become his family in many ways. But there was something different in Marco's tone, something that spoke to a deeper bond than even Luffy fully understood. He called you all his sons, Luffy recalled, remembering scenes from the war at Marineford. Even when he was dying, he was trying to protect you. Marco nodded. Until his last breath. That's the kind of man Edward Newgate was. His strength was legendary, but his heart, that was truly extraordinary. A comfortable silence fell over the table as everyone absorbed these words. It was broken when the tavern door burst open, revealing one of the town's watchmen. Mayor Rena, he called urgently. There's a ship approaching from the east. It's flying a marine flag. The news sent a ripple of tension through the room. While Marines weren't automatically enemies, their arrival so soon after a pirate attack raised questions. Marines? Here. Rena stood, her face concerned. We haven't had a Marine visit in over a year. Marco and the Straw Hats exchanged glances. The timing was suspicious. Could they be responding to the attack? Jinbe suggested. Not this quickly, Frankie countered. News couldn't have reached them yet. Unless they were already in the area, Robin said thoughtfully. Perhaps tracking Vargas. Luffy pushed his empty plate away and stood up. Only one way to find out. Let's go see what they want. As the group moved toward the door, Mayor Rena put a restraining hand on Luffy's arm. Wait. If they're here for you, for your bounty, I won't let them take you. Not after what you've done for us today. The sincerity in her voice took Luffy by surprise. He grinned, touched by her concern. Don't worry about us. We've dealt with Marines before. Besides, Nami added with a sly smile, if things get too heated, we can always slip away in the dark. The Sunny's ready for a quick departure if needed. The harbor was illuminated by torches as the marine vessel approached. It wasn't a massive battleship but rather a sleek cruiser designed for speed rather than overwhelming firepower. Still, it represented enough of a threat that the townspeople watched its approach with wary eyes. Marco stood slightly apart from the group, his posture casual but his eyes alert. As former first mate of the Whitebeard pirates, his bounty was still active and substantial. You should probably stay out of sight, Luffy suggested to him, showing surprising tactical awareness. At least until we know what they want. Marco raised an eyebrow but nodded. Logical. I'll watch from above. With that, his arms transformed into wings, and he soared upward to perch on a nearby rooftop, his blue flames dimming to near invisibility in the night. The marine ship docked with practiced efficiency, and a gangplank extended to the pier. The first to disembark was a tall woman in a captain's coat, her dark hair cut severely short and a scar running along her jawline. Behind her came a standard complement of Marines, armed but not immediately aggressive. Captain Miura of the Marine Corps, she announced, her eyes scanning the crowd until they landed on Mayor Rena. I'm looking for the leadership of this island. Rena stepped forward, her back straight despite her age. I am Mayor Rena. What brings the Marines to Flameheart after all this time? Captain Miura's expression remained professional. We received intelligence that this island was targeted by the pirate Vargas. We're here to offer assistance and protection. Suspicious murmurs ran through the crowd. The timing was too convenient, the offer too sudden after years of neglect. Your intelligence is correct but outdated, Rena replied coolly. Vargas attacked this morning. He has been dealt with. Miura's eyes narrowed. Dealt with? By local forces. We had help, Rena said, deliberately vague. It was then that Miura noticed Luffy and his crew standing nearby. Her hand instinctively moved toward her weapon. The Straw Hat Pirates. I should have known. Luffy met her gaze without hostility. We were just passing by. Saw people who needed help and gave it. How altruistic, Miura responded, skepticism clear in her voice. And I suppose you expect nothing in return? Pirates don't typically provide charity. These aren't typical pirates, Rina interjected firmly. They saved our medicinal crop from complete destruction and captured over 24 of Vargas's men. This information seemed to surprise the Marine captain. She studied Luffy more carefully, reassessing. I see. Well, in that case, perhaps we can take the prisoners off your hands. They'll face proper justice at Marine headquarters. Luffy shrugged. Fine by me. They're not our problem. Miura hesitated, clearly having expected more resistance. Just like that? No conditions. Just one, Luffy said, his voice suddenly serious. Those men burned fields, destroyed people's livelihoods. Make sure they actually face consequences, instead of just getting recruited into your ranks or let go because they weren't important enough. The direct challenge made Miura's jaw tighten, but she gave a curt nod. I assure you, Captain Straw Hat, they will answer for their crimes. With that settled, she turned back to Mayor Rina. There's another reason for our visit. We're tracking Vargas because he's been systematically attacking former Whitebeard territories. The world government is concerned about the power vacuum in these regions. Concerned? Jinbe repeated skeptically. The Marines have shown little interest in protecting these islands since Whitebeard fell. Policies change, Miura replied evenly. The new fleet admiral recognizes that stability in the new world serves everyone's interests. How convenient, Robin murmured, just loud enough to be heard. Miura ignored the comment and addressed Rina directly. We'd like to offer Flameheart official marine protection. Regular patrols, a small permanent detachment, assistance with rebuilding damaged infrastructure. The offer hung in the air, its implications clear. After years of surviving on their own, the island was being offered security, at the price of increased marine presence and control. Rina looked genuinely torn. That's a generous offer, Captain. But I would need to consult with our island council before making such a decision. Of course, Miura nodded. Take whatever time you need. We'll remain in port until morning to collect the prisoners and await your initial thoughts. As the Marine contingent moved to secure the captured pirates, Luffy pulled Rina aside, keeping his voice low. You don't trust them, he observed. Rina sighed. The Marines ignored us for 3 years. Now suddenly they want to protect us. There's more to this than simple benevolence. You think they're trying to establish control over Whitebeard's old territories before someone else does, Robin suggested, joining them. Exactly, Rina confirmed. But what choice do we have? We can't keep fighting off pirates like Vargas forever, not without help. Luffy considered this, his expression uncharacteristically thoughtful. What if you had another option? What do you mean? An alliance, Luffy said simply. Not with us specifically, we have our own journey to continue. But with other islands in the same situation. Share resources, information, maybe even fighting forces. Rina's eyes widened. A coalition of former Whitebeard territories. Why not? Luffy grinned. You already said you learned to play pirates against each other. Together, you'd be even stronger. That's actually quite brilliant, Jinbe commented, looking at Luffy with newfound respect. A mutual defense pact would give these islands leverage with both pirates and Marines. From the shadows above, Marco watched this exchange with intense interest, his expression unreadable in the darkness. Later that night, as the Straw Hats prepared to sleep in rooms provided by grateful townspeople, Luffy found himself unable to rest. He sat on the roof of the inn, legs dangling over the edge, staring at the distant volcano silhouetted against the starry sky. "Can't sleep, you are?" Luffy didn't startle at Marco's voice, he'd sensed the Phoenix's approach through his observation haki. "Just thinking." Marco settled beside him, his usual lazy expression in place. "A dangerous pastime." That drew a laugh from Luffy. "Yeah, my crew's always surprised when I do it too." They sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes before Marco spoke again. "That suggestion you made to Rina, about an alliance between islands. That's not something I would have expected from you." Luffy shrugged. "Why not?" "It makes sense. Because it's strategic thinking on a scale beyond immediate battles," Marco explained. "It's the kind of thing Whitebeard excelled at, seeing the bigger picture, understanding how power flows and changes." "I'm not trying to be like Whitebeard," Luffy repeated, a hint of frustration creeping into his voice. "I know," Marco replied, surprising him. "That's what makes it interesting. You're reaching similar conclusions through completely different paths." He looked up at the stars. "Whitebeard protected islands because he believed in giving people the freedom to live their lives without fear. What's your reason?" Luffy thought about it, genuinely considering the question. "I guess, because people should be free to chase their dreams. And it's hard to dream when you're just trying to survive." Marco nodded, a small smile playing at his lips. Not so different after all. The next morning brought clear skies and a flurry of activity. The Straw Hats prepared the Thousand Sunny for departure while the Marines loaded their prisoners onto their ship. In the town hall, Mayor Rina and her council met with Captain Miura to discuss the protection offer. As Luffy supervised the loading of fresh supplies, mostly meat, to no one's surprise, Marco approached, now openly wearing his Whitebeard insignia. "I've made a decision," the Phoenix announced without preamble. "I'm going to visit the remaining territories myself, starting with the ones in the southwest. I'll spread the word about your alliance idea." Luffy brightened. "Really? That's great." Marco nodded. "They'll listen to me, given my connection to Pops. And I can move quickly on my own. What about coming with us to Greenstone and Tidehaven first?" Luffy suggested. "No," Marco shook his head. "You can handle those. I'll start with the more distant islands, the ones most vulnerable to Vargas if he's heading southwest." As they discussed details, Mayor Rina emerged from the town hall, her expression satisfied. She spotted them and changed course to approach. "We've reached an agreement with the Marines," she announced. "They'll provide limited protection, regular patrols, emergency response, but no permanent presence on the island. And we've retained full autonomy over our trade and governance." "They agreed to that?" Jinbe asked, surprised. Rina smiled shrewdly. "They did after I mentioned we were considering forming a mutual defense alliance with other former Whitebeard territories. Suddenly their offer became much more reasonable." Luffy laughed, delighted by her negotiating tactics. "See? I told you it was a good idea." "It was," Rina agreed, her expression turning serious. "And we'd like to be the first island to formally propose such an alliance. I've already drafted messages to our trading partners at Greenstone and Tidehaven." "Perfect timing," Nami called from the ship. "That's where we're heading next." With final preparations complete, the Straw Hats gathered at the gangplank, ready to depart. The townspeople had assembled to see them off, bringing additional gifts of food, medicine, and a small supply of their precious herbs as thanks. Captain Miura watched from a distance, her expression carefully neutral as she observed the obvious goodwill between the pirates and islanders. "You know," she said quietly to her lieutenant, "they don't fit the profile of typical pirates at all." "Sir?" the lieutenant questioned. "The Straw Hats," Miura clarified. "I've studied their record. Everywhere they go, they seem to leave people better off than they found them. Alabasta, Water 7, Dressrosa, even Wano, if the reports are accurate." "Are you suggesting they're not a threat, Captain?" Miura shook her head. Oh, they're absolutely a threat, just not to civilians. To the world government's absolute authority? That's another matter entirely. She turned away. Prepare to depart once the prisoners are secured. And make sure our report mentions the potential alliance between territories. Headquarters will want to know about that development. On the dock, Luffy was the last to board, shaking hands with Mayor Rena. Thank you, she said simply. Not just for saving us from Vargas, but for giving us a path forward. Luffy grinned. Just make sure you're ready if Vargas comes back. And if you ever need help again. We'll manage, Rena assured him with a confident smile. But it's good to know we have friends out there. As the Thousand Sunny pulled away from the dock, Marco took to the air, his blue flames bright against the morning sky. He circled once over the ship in salute before speeding away toward the horizon. Luffy watched him go, then turned his attention forward, to the open sea and whatever adventures awaited them at Greenstone Island. Behind him, his crew moved with practiced efficiency, setting the sails and plotting their course. You know, Robin said, coming to stand beside him at the figurehead, what you suggested to Flameheart, an alliance of islands, that's similar to how Whitebeard built his influence initially. Luffy made a face. I told Marco, I'm not trying to be like Whitebeard. I know, Robin smiled. But perhaps there are only so many ways to be truly great in this world. The paths may look different, but they often lead to similar destinations. Luffy considered this, then shrugged with his characteristic grin. As long as the path leads to being Pirate King and having the most freedom on the sea, I don't care if it looks like someone else's. Robin chuckled. Fair enough. Though I wonder what Marco thinks about all this. He'll tell us when he's ready, Luffy said with surprising insight. He's watching to see if I'm worthy of something, not sure what yet, but I'll figure it out. As the Sunny pulled further from shore, Jinbe approached with news from their newest heading. According to my sources, Greenstone Island has been having problems with more than just pirates, the fishman reported. Strange weather patterns, unexpected currents, it's as if the very sea around it is becoming hostile. Nami frowned. Natural phenomena or something else? Unknown, Jinbe replied. But it started shortly after Whitebeard's death. Luffy's eyes gleamed with excitement. Mysterious weather. Sounds like an adventure. And as the Thousand Sunny sailed toward new challenges, the legend of the Straw Hat Pirates grew a little larger, spreading across Flameheart Island and beyond, the story of pirates who protected rather than plundered, who offered alliance rather than demanding submission. It wasn't the typical path to infamy in the pirate world, but then, Monkey D. Luffy had never been a typical pirate. Perhaps, in his own unique way, he was already beginning to understand what had made Edward Newgate truly great. Chapter 2, The Admiral's Gambit. The morning sky darkened to an unnatural purple-black as the Thousand Sunny approached Greenstone Island. What had started as gentle rain 20 minutes ago had transformed into sideways sheets that stung like needles. Lightning forked across the clouds in impossible patterns, zigzags that turned at perfect right angles and spirals that seemed to chase their own tails. Nami gripped the ship's wheel, her knuckles white as she fought to maintain their course. This isn't natural, she shouted over the howling wind. The pressure dropped too fast, and these wind patterns make no scientific sense. Frankie and Usopp worked frantically to secure loose items on deck while Jinbe stood at the bow, communing with the increasingly hostile waves. The fishman's face was tense with concentration as he directed currents to guide their path. The sea itself feels wrong, Jinbe called back. Agitated, almost angry, like it's being forced to behave against its nature. Luffy clung to Sunny's mane, squinting through the downpour toward their destination. The island was barely visible now, just a dark mass occasionally illuminated by flashes of lightning. Those glimpses revealed towering cliffs of green-tinged stone rising straight from the sea, with what appeared to be a narrow harbor entrance on the eastern side. Is this the weird weather you mentioned? Luffy shouted to Jinbe over the storm's roar. Yes, but far more intense than reported. Jinbe replied, his powerful arms moving in flowing patterns as he worked with the sea rather than against it. Something has escalated the situation. A massive wave, at least 30 feet high, suddenly rose before them like a wall. Nami reacted instantly, spinning the wheel hard to port. Frankie. Coup de burst, now, she commanded. We're running low on cola after the last one. Frankie warned, already racing for the engine room. Just enough to clear that wave or we're finished. The shipwright didn't waste time arguing. Seconds later, the Sunny's signature escape technique activated, a massive burst of compressed air from the ship's rear propelling them skyward. They soared over the crest of the monster wave, the entire crew clinging to whatever they could grab as the ship bucked and shuddered. They landed hard on the other side, seawater crashing over the deck. Chopper, the smallest among them, lost his grip and was swept toward the railing. Robin reacted instantly, crossing her arms to sprout a chain of limbs that caught the little reindeer before he could go overboard. Thanks, Robin. Chopper gasped, scrambling back to safety. Look. Sanji pointed ahead. The harbor entrance. Through the chaos, a narrow passage between two towering cliffs had appeared, relatively sheltered from the worst of the storm. Nami adjusted their heading, eyes locked on the target. It's barely wide enough for the Sunny, she warned. And those rocks on either side will tear us apart if we're off by even a few feet. Leave it to me, Jinbe said with calm confidence. He took position at the bow, assuming a stance Luffy recognized from their time in Wano. The fishman's fishman karate techniques had proven capable of controlling water currents with incredible precision. Everyone secure yourselves. Luffy ordered. Jinbe's got this. As they approached the narrow passage, Jinbe's hands moved in complex patterns, his entire body radiating focused power. The violent waters around the ship seemed to hesitate, then smoothed into a controlled channel that guided the Sunny forward. Still, it took all of Nami's navigational skill to keep them centered as the towering cliffs closed in on both sides, so close they could have reached out to touch them. For one breathless minute, all they could hear was the scrape of rock against the ship's coating and the roar of the storm behind them. Then they burst through into the harbor beyond, a perfectly circular natural bay surrounded by steep green cliffs on all sides. Most surprisingly, the water here was completely calm, almost unnaturally so given the chaos just outside the passage. The sky above the bay remained cloudy but lacked the violent storms raging around the island's perimeter. It's like we're in the eye of a hurricane, Robin observed, looking up at the circle of calm directly overhead. Nami slumped against the wheel, exhausted but relieved. That was the most unnatural weather pattern I've ever navigated. Something's manipulating these conditions. The harbor itself appeared largely deserted. A small village of stone buildings climbed the terraced cliffs, but no ships occupied the wooden docks that lined the bay's edge. As the Sunny approached the empty port, they finally spotted signs of life, a small group of people hurrying down from the village toward the docks. They don't look happy to see us, Usopp noted nervously, adjusting his goggles to get a better view. Actually, they look terrified. Pirates haven't exactly been friendly to these islands lately, Jinbe reminded them. After Vargas's attacks, they have reason to be cautious. Luffy bounced impatiently on the figurehead. Let's just tell them we're here to help. Maybe let Jinbe or Nami handle the initial introductions, Robin suggested diplomatically. Your enthusiasm might be misinterpreted. Luffy pouted but didn't argue. As they docked, the welcoming committee, if it could be called that, maintained a wary distance. The apparent leader was a tall woman with graying hair pulled into a severe bun, carrying what appeared to be a ceremonial spear of polished green stone. Identify yourselves and state your business, she called as soon as they were within earshot, her voice carrying authority despite her obvious tension. Jinbe stepped forward, his imposing figure softened by his respectful manner. We are the Straw Hat Pirates, led by Captain Monkey D. Luffy. We come in peace, seeking only to warn you about potential threats and to understand the strange weather surrounding your island. The woman's eyes widened at the crew's identification, her gaze moving to Luffy, who waved cheerfully from the deck. The Straw Hat Pirates. The ones who defended Flameheart Island. That caught them by surprise. Word travels fast, Sanji commented, lighting a cigarette despite the damp conditions. We received a message bird just hours ago, the woman explained, her stance relaxing slightly. Mayor Rena of Flameheart warned us that Vargas might target us next and that, friends might be coming to help. She studied them more carefully, suspicion not entirely gone. Though she didn't specify that those friends would be another pirate crew. We're not like other pirates, Luffy called out, jumping down to the dock with a thud. We don't steal from people or hurt them. Unless they're bad guys, then we definitely hurt them. He grinned widely, seemingly unaware of how his words might sound threatening. The woman didn't flinch, meeting his gaze steadily. I am Elder Tashigi, leader of Greenstone's council. If you truly come as allies, you are welcome, cautiously. We have few friends these days. She gestured to the empty harbor. As you can see, trade has become impossible with the barrier storms. Barrier storms? Nami asked, joining Luffy on the dock. Tashigi nodded grimly. That's what we call them. For months now, unnatural weather has surrounded our island, growing steadily worse. Ships can't get in or out except during brief, unpredictable calm periods. We're nearly out of imported supplies, and none of our trading partners can reach us. When did this start? Robin inquired, her historian's mind already analyzing patterns. The storms began shortly after news of Whitebeard's death reached us, one of the men in Tashigi's group answered. Weak at first, just unusual weather. But they've grown steadily worse, especially in the past month. Luffy crossed his arms, his expression unusually thoughtful. First Vargas attacking Whitebeard's old islands, now weird storms. There's a connection. Perhaps, Tashigi agreed, but for now, our immediate concern is survival. Without trade, we're running dangerously low on essentials. The fact that you managed to navigate through the storms is remarkable. That's thanks to Nami and Jinbe, Luffy said proudly, pointing to his navigator and helmsman. Nami's the best weather expert in the world, and Jinbe can talk to the ocean. Simplified, but essentially correct, Jinbe confirmed with gentle amusement. Though I'd say I work with the currents rather than talk to them. Tashigi studied the crew with new interest. Perhaps you can help us understand what's happening, then. She turned, gesturing toward the village. Come. You must be tired after battling those waters. We can offer what hospitality we have while we exchange information. As they followed the Greenstone delegation up the carved stone steps leading to the village, Zoro finally spoke up, having been unusually quiet during their arrival. There's something else, he said, his hand resting casually on his swords. Something you're not telling us. Tashigi tensed, then sighed, slowing to let the swordsman catch up to her. Perceptive. Yes, there's more, but it's not something to discuss on open paths. Walls have ears, especially lately. Zoro nodded, accepting the answer for now, but his vigilance remained obvious to his crewmates. Something about this island had triggered his exceptional instincts for danger. The village of Greenstone wasn't large but showed signs of having once been prosperous. Buildings constructed from the island's namesake stone rose in terraced layers against the cliff faces, connected by elaborate staircases and bridges. Gardens had been ingeniously incorporated into the vertical design, though many now appeared neglected. The most impressive structure stood at the highest point, a circular temple-like building with a domed roof of copper, now green with age. The resonance chamber, Tashigi explained, noting their interest in the structure. The heart of Greenstone's culture. We'll speak more of it later. They were led to what appeared to be a meeting hall near the center of the village. Inside, a long stone table dominated the space, surrounded by chairs carved from the same green-tinged rock that seemed to make up everything on the island. Maps and charts covered one wall, many marked with weather patterns and what appeared to be shipping routes. Once they were seated and served a simple but welcome meal of fish stew and stone-hard bread, Tashigi dismissed the other villagers, closing the heavy door behind them. "Now we can speak freely," she said, taking her place at the head of the table. "The situation is more complicated than simple weather problems. We believe someone is deliberately targeting former Whitebeard territories, not just Vargas with his direct attacks, but something more insidious." "The Marines," Jinbe guessed, his expression grim. Tashigi nodded. "Not all of them, but certain factions. We received a visit 3 months ago from a marine vessel led by an admiral we hadn't encountered before. He called himself Admiral Kurikiba." Luffy's eyes narrowed. "Never heard of him." "He must be newly promoted," Robin suggested. "The Navy has been restructuring since the events at Wano. This Kurikiba," Tashigi continued, "offered us protection in exchange for allowing a permanent marine base on our island. When we declined, citing our traditional independence, he was displeased. The storms worsened dramatically after his departure." "You think he's causing the weather?" Nami asked, leaning forward with professional interest. "We don't know how, but the timing is too convenient to ignore," Tashigi replied. "And there's more. Fishermen who ventured near the storm boundary report seeing marine ships patrolling just beyond the worst weather, as if waiting. A blockade under the guise of natural disasters," Robin concluded. "Clever. They can deny responsibility while effectively cutting you off from the outside world." Sanji frowned. Starving civilians into submission doesn't sound like the Marines' usual approach. "The Navy has changed," Jinbe reminded them. "With Akainu as fleet admiral, their tactics have hardened. And if this Kurikiba is a new admiral, he may be trying to prove himself through results rather than methods." Luffy had been uncharacteristically quiet during this discussion, absently stuffing bread into his mouth while listening. Now he spoke up, his voice serious despite his full cheeks. "So what's so special about this island that they want it so badly?" It was a surprisingly insightful question, causing several of his crewmates to look at him with mild surprise. Tashigi's expression grew guarded. "That is complicated. The official reason would be our strategic location and natural harbor, valuable military assets. But the truth involves the resonance chamber I mentioned earlier." She hesitated, weighing how much to reveal to pirates she'd just met, regardless of their reputation. "You can trust us," Luffy said simply, reading her hesitation. "We're not here to take anything from you." The elder studied him for a long moment, then nodded, apparently finding what she sought in his open expression. "The resonance chamber houses what we call the singing stones, massive crystals that grow only in the heart of our island. They vibrate in response to certain energies, creating sounds that can be heard for miles when amplified properly." She paused, choosing her next words carefully. "In the right hands, they can also affect weather patterns, currents, even communicate with sea creatures over vast distances." "Like a natural transponder snail system," Frankie suggested, immediately intrigued by the technological implications. "More powerful and more versatile," Tashigi corrected. Whitebeard understood their value but also their potential for misuse. His protection ensured we maintained control over their application. "And now the Marines want that control," Nami concluded. "Or they want to ensure no one else gets it," Robin added thoughtfully. "Particularly other emperors looking to fill Whitebeard's vacancy." Luffy slammed his hand on the table, startling everyone. "That's it. That's why the storm started after Whitebeard died. Someone's using your singing rocks but doing it wrong." The simplicity of his conclusion was so typically Luffy that several crew members sighed, but Tashigi looked thoughtful rather than dismissive. "You may not be far wrong, Captain Straw Hat. The singing stones respond to specific harmonies, knowledge passed down through our elders for generations. Used improperly, they could indeed create chaos rather than harmony." "Then we need to see these stones," Luffy declared, already standing. "If someone's messing with them, we'll stop them." "It's not that simple," Tashigi cautioned. "The chamber is sacred ground, and the stones themselves are dangerous to those who don't know how to approach them. Their vibrations can shatter bones at close range if mishandled. But you think this Admiral Kurikiba has found a way to influence them from outside the island, Jinbe observed. Tashigi nodded. We believe he obtained partial knowledge, enough to disrupt but not control. The resulting storm barrier serves his purposes for now, isolating us until we're desperate enough to accept his terms. And how close are you to that point? Sanji asked quietly. The elder's face showed momentary vulnerability before her composure returned. Too close. We have perhaps 2 weeks of supplies remaining, even with rationing. Some argue we should accept the Marine's offer before people begin to starve. Luffy's expression hardened with determination. That's not happening. We'll break this weather thing and make sure you can get supplies. Just like that? Tashigi asked, a mix of hope and skepticism in her voice. Just like that, Luffy confirmed with absolute confidence. First, we need to see those singing rocks. Then Nami can figure out the weather part, and Jinbe can help with the ocean currents. The straightforward approach was so typical of their captain that the Straw Hats couldn't help but smile, despite the seriousness of the situation. Luffy's ability to reduce seemingly complex problems to simple, actionable steps was part of what made following him so oddly reassuring. Tashigi appeared less convinced but nodded nonetheless. Very well. I will take you to the resonance chamber. But I must insist that you follow our protocols exactly. The stones are unpredictable, especially lately. As they prepared to leave the meeting hall, Zoro moved closer to Luffy, keeping his voice low. Something doesn't add up. If the Marines want the island, why not just invade? Why the elaborate weather manipulation? Political deniability, Robin suggested, overhearing. Direct conquest of civilian islands without provocation violates certain world government treaties. But if the residents voluntarily request protection due to natural disasters? No one asks too many questions, Zoro finished grimly. Sneaky bastards. Outside, the strange calm within the harbor's protected zone continued, though they could see the violent storm still raging beyond the cliffs. The entire village had an unsettling quiet about it, few children playing, minimal activity in what should have been a bustling community. The effects of isolation were already showing. Their group attracted curious stares as Tashigi led them upward through winding staircases carved directly into the green stone. As they climbed higher, a faint humming became perceptible, not quite sound but something felt in the chest and bones. The singing stones, Tashigi confirmed, noting their reactions. They're more active than usual, another sign something is wrong. The resonance chamber, impressive from a distance, was breathtaking up close. The copper dome was intricately engraved with patterns resembling waves and currents, while the walls were not solid but consisted of precisely arranged pillars of green stone, allowing air to flow freely through the structure. 2 robed figures stood guard at the entrance, holding staffs topped with smaller versions of what awaited inside. They bowed respectfully to Tashigi but regarded the pirates with open suspicion. These are guests under my protection, Tashigi informed them firmly. They may be able to help with our situation. The guards exchanged glances but stepped aside, one adding a warning, the stones are especially volatile today, Elder. Approach with caution. Inside, the source of the humming became immediately apparent. Arranged in a perfect circle were 7 crystals, each nearly twice Luffy's height. They weren't the green of the island stone but a deep blue that seemed to shift and pulse with inner light. The humming came from these massive formations, each vibrating at a slightly different frequency that combined into a discordant whole. Normally, they produce a harmonious tone, Tashigi explained, wincing at the current sound. The dissonance began with the storms. Nami approached carefully, her face showing professional curiosity. They're responding to the atmospheric conditions? It's more accurate to say the atmospheric conditions are responding to them, Tashigi corrected. The singing stones don't just react to weather, they can influence it when properly tuned. Like a giant, natural weather control system, Nami breathed, fascinated by the implications. Luffy walked straight toward the nearest crystal, hand outstretched. So we just need to fix the tune, right? Wait! Tashigi cried in alarm. Direct contact without proper, her warning came too late. Luffy's palm touched the surface of the nearest stone. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The crystal's blue glow intensified sharply, and the discordant humming suddenly focused into a single, piercing note that made everyone clap hands over their ears. Luffy himself was thrown backward several feet, landing in a surprised heap. Ow! It zapped me, he complained, examining his hand. There was no visible damage, but his fingers tingled uncomfortably. I tried to warn you, Tashigi sighed, helping him up. The stones respond to life energy, what you might call haki. Someone with your potent spiritual presence creates a strong reaction. Robin had been examining the base of the crystals, where intricate carvings covered the stone pedestals. These are musical notations, she observed. Instructions for creating specific harmonies. Correct, Tashigi nodded, impressed by her perception. Each pattern produces a different effect: calm seas, favorable winds, fish migration guidance. Our elders learned these sequences through years of study. So someone's messing with the sequence to create the storms, Luffy concluded, dusting himself off. We just need to find them and beat them up. It's not that simple, Tashigi countered. The interference appears to be coming from outside the island. We've searched extensively, there's no one here manipulating the stones directly. Jinbe, who had been quietly communing with the chamber's energy, spoke up. There's something familiar about this resonance. He closed his eyes, concentrating. It reminds me of certain deep-sea currents that respond to moon phases, a pulling sensation rather than a pushing one. You think someone found a way to influence the stones remotely? Frankie asked. It would require intimate knowledge of the stone's properties, Tashigi said doubtfully. Knowledge that only our elders possess. Or someone who had access to that knowledge through other means, Robin suggested. Perhaps ancient texts or records that mention these stones. A sudden change in the humming interrupted their discussion. The discordant notes shifted, aligning briefly into something almost melodious before fragmenting again into chaos. Simultaneously, they felt a change in the air pressure, as if the atmosphere itself was fluctuating. The barrier storms are shifting, Tashigi said urgently, moving to a window that faced the harbor. This happens occasionally, brief windows where the weather stabilizes enough for ships to pass. They joined her at the window, looking out over the bay and the narrow passage beyond. Sure enough, the violent clouds were thinning, the lightning less frequent. And in that temporary calm, a ship was approaching, a marine vessel with a distinctive figurehead shaped like a snarling wolf. Admiral Kurikiba, Tashigi whispered, her face paling. He always seems to know exactly when the storms will ease. Because he's the one controlling them, Zoro growled, hand moving to his swords. Or at least influencing them, Jinbe amended. The timing is too perfect to be coincidental. They watched as the marine ship navigated the passage with suspicious ease, despite the still challenging conditions. The vessel was smaller than a typical marine battleship but sleeker, built for speed and maneuverability rather than overwhelming firepower. We should go meet our guest, Luffy decided, his tone making it clear exactly what kind of welcome he had in mind. Wait, Tashigi cautioned. Confronting an admiral directly could make things worse for our people if you fail. We need to understand his methods first. Then we'll watch and listen, Jinbe suggested diplomatically. Learn his approach before acting. Luffy looked ready to argue but glanced at the worried faces of the villagers visible in the streets below, already reacting to the marine ship's arrival. Fine. We watch first. But if he threatens anyone, I'm not waiting. They hurried back down to the village, keeping to side paths to avoid immediate detection. From a vantage point overlooking the main harbor square, they watched as Admiral Kurikiba disembarked, flanked by a contingent of marine officers. The admiral wasn't what Luffy expected. Rather than an imposing physical presence like a Kainu or Kizaru, Kurikiba was of average height and lean build, with sharp features and calculating eyes. His most distinctive feature was his hair, pure white despite his relatively young appearance, styled short except for a longer section that fell over one eye. His marine coat hung from his shoulders in the traditional style, but beneath it, he wore a surprisingly simple black uniform without adornment. "Doesn't look that tough," Luffy muttered, unimpressed. "Appearances can be deceiving," Jinbe warned quietly. "Remember, he's an admiral. That rank isn't given lightly." A reception committee had formed to greet the Marines, composed of several village elders but notably missing Tashigi. Kurikiba surveyed the group with a slight smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Elders of Greenstone," he called in a smooth, cultured voice that carried clearly to where the straw hats were concealed. "I trust these continuing storms haven't caused too much hardship. Such unpredictable weather these seas produce." The blatant insincerity of his concern was clear even from a distance. One of the older men stepped forward, his expression carefully neutral. "Admiral Kurikiba, your concern is noted. Has the Navy reconsidered our request for aid without the conditions previously attached?" The Admiral's smile thinned. "I'm afraid the world government's position remains unchanged. Strategic resources such as your island represent cannot be left unprotected in these chaotic times. A permanent marine presence is the minimum security requirement. Even as we speak, our people grow hungry," another elder challenged, a woman with deep lines etched into her weathered face. "The storms prevent any trade or fishing beyond the harbor." "A truly unfortunate situation," Kurikiba replied with mock sympathy. "One that could be resolved immediately with your cooperation. My ships could escort supply vessels through the dangerous waters, once our agreement is formalized." "Blackmail," Sanji muttered, his visible eye narrowing in disgust. "Using hunger as a weapon. Unfortunately effective," Robin commented softly. "Desperation makes reasonable people accept unreasonable terms." Luffy's hands had curled into fists, his body tense with barely contained anger. "I'm going down there." Jinbe placed a restraining hand on his shoulder. "Patience, Luffy-kun. Let's see his full plan before we act. Information is advantage." Below, the conversation continued. The elders were attempting to negotiate better terms while Kurikiba maintained his position with the confidence of someone holding all the cards. As they debated, a commotion at the edge of the square drew everyone's attention. A young man broke through the crowd, pointing accusingly at the admiral. "You're the one causing the storms. My father was on the Tide Runner when it sank last week, a ship that had safely navigated these waters for 30 years. The sudden accusation created a ripple of murmurs through the assembled villagers. Kurikiba's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered in his eyes. "Grief often leads to irrational conclusions, young man," he said dismissively. "The weather patterns affecting your island are a natural phenomenon, perhaps triggered by underwater seismic activity. The Navy is offering protection from these natural disasters, not causing them." "Liar," the young man shouted, lunging forward. Before he could take 3 steps, one of Kurikiba's officers intercepted him, twisting his arm behind his back. The admiral watched impassively as the villager was restrained. "I understand emotions are running high," he addressed the crowd. "Which is why I've brought a gesture of goodwill." He signaled to his ship, and several marines began unloading crates onto the dock. "Basic supplies, enough for perhaps a week. Consider it an incentive to make the right decision before these run out." The calculated generosity was masterful, offering just enough to demonstrate his power while ensuring the pressure remained. Some villagers moved forward eagerly at the sight of food, while others held back, pride and suspicion warring with hunger. "I'll return in exactly 7 days," Kurikiba announced. "I hope by then you'll have come to the sensible conclusion. The weather patterns show no signs of abating naturally. His gaze swept the crowd, lingering briefly on the buildings higher up the terraced village, uncomfortably close to where the straw hats were hidden. I would hate to see your situation deteriorate further. The threat, thinly veiled, hung in the air as he turned to leave. At that moment, a stone clattered down from somewhere above, landing near his feet. The Admiral paused, looking up with narrowed eyes. It seems not all of Greenstone's residents are present for our discussion, he observed mildly. Perhaps someone should ensure Elder Tashigi is informed of my generous offer. His gaze moved deliberately up the terraced paths, scanning the buildings where the straw hats were concealed. For a moment, it seemed he was looking directly at their hiding spot, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. He knows we're here, Zoro muttered, hand tightening on his sword hilt. Not necessarily, Robin countered. He may just suspect someone is watching. Either way, we should move, Jinbe advised. If he is aware of our presence, confronting him unprepared would be unwise. They retreated quietly, working their way through back alleys to rendezvous with Tashigi at a small stone cottage set apart from the main village. Inside, the elder was consulting ancient texts spread across a wide table, her expression frustrated. You saw him, she stated rather than asked when they entered. Yeah, Luffy confirmed. He's definitely behind the storms. The way he talked about them, like he was enjoying seeing everyone suffer. He's playing a patience game, Jinbe observed. Slowly increasing pressure until the island surrenders voluntarily. Tashigi nodded grimly. A direct takeover would raise questions from the world government's Civilian Oversight Council. This way, when we request marine protection, it appears legitimate. We need to break his control over the singing stones, Nami declared. I've been thinking about the weather patterns. They're unnatural but not random, they follow a contained system designed to isolate the island while maintaining that small zone of calm in the harbor. Precisely engineered, Frankie agreed. Too perfect to be accidental. But how is he influencing them from outside? Usopp wondered. Tashigi said only the elders know how to work the stones. A shadow crossed Tashigi's face. That's not entirely accurate. There was an elder, Masuto, who disappeared 3 months ago, shortly before the storms began. We assumed he was lost at sea, but he's working with Kurikiba, Zoro concluded flatly. Willingly or otherwise. It would explain the Admiral's knowledge, Robin agreed. An insider providing the secrets of the singing stones. Luffy slammed his fist into his palm. So we find this Masuto guy and make him undo whatever he did. It's not that simple, Tashigi sighed. Even if Masuto is helping them, the stones require precise physical interaction within the resonance chamber to fully control them. What they're doing is crude interference, enough to create chaos but not true harmony. Like jamming a signal, Frankie suggested, drawing on his technical knowledge. They're broadcasting disruptive frequencies to overwhelm the stone's natural patterns. Nami's eyes lit up with sudden understanding. That's it. They must have a device that mimics the stone's resonance frequency but slightly out of phase, creating destructive interference. And if we could find that device? Robin began. We could smash it. Luffy finished enthusiastically. Or better yet, modify it to cancel itself out, Frankie amended. Fight frequency with frequency. Tashigi looked between them with growing hope. You truly think you can counter their technology? Between Frankie's engineering skills and my weather knowledge, absolutely, Nami confirmed. But first, we need to locate their broadcast point. It has to be within range of the island but outside the storm barrier, Jinbe reasoned. Somewhere the signals can reach the singing stones without being disrupted by the very storms they're creating. There's an uninhabited islet about 5 miles northwest of here, Tashigi recalled. Little more than a rock formation, but it would provide a stable platform with direct line of sight to the island. That's where I'd put it, Frankie agreed. Close enough for the signal to reach but far enough to stay clear of the worst weather effects. Then that's where we're going, Luffy decided. If we destroy whatever's messing with your singing rocks, the storms should stop, right? In theory, Tashigi nodded cautiously. Though Kurikiba won't surrender so easily. Good, Luffy grinned, cracking his knuckles. Because I want to fight him anyway. Nobody uses food as a weapon against hungry people. We should move quickly, Jinbe advised. While Kurikiba believes we're just observing, we have the advantage of surprise. We'll need to split up, Nami suggested, already thinking tactically. One group to find and disable the device, another to remain here in case Kurikiba returns unexpectedly. I'll go after the device, Luffy volunteered immediately. Frankie should come too, since he knows about machine stuff. I'll join you, Jinbe added. My abilities will help navigate the storm boundary. I should go as well, Nami said. If we're dealing with weather manipulation, you'll need my expertise. The others would remain on Greenstone, ready to defend the village and the resonance chamber if necessary. With the plan decided, they prepared to move out, gathering supplies and information from Tashigi about the surrounding waters. As sunset approached, Jinbe, Frankie, Nami, and Luffy prepared to depart in the Mini Mary, small enough to navigate the difficult waters but sturdy enough to handle rough conditions. They would wait until full dark, using the night to conceal their approach. Be careful, Robin cautioned as they prepared to leave. Admiral Kurikiba struck me as unusually perceptive. He may have anticipated countermeasures. If he has, we'll deal with it, Luffy replied confidently. Besides, he thinks we're just watching. He doesn't know we've figured out his trick. Zoro clapped his captain on the shoulder. Try not to sink before you find the device. If we're not back by morning, assume something went wrong, Jinbe told them seriously. In that case, prepare the village for Kurikiba's return. He won't be pleased if he discovers interference. With final preparations complete, the small group slipped down to the harbor under cover of early evening shadows. The Mini Mary, already loaded with necessary equipment, waited at a small dock away from the main port where the marine ship had been. Kurikiba's vessel had departed shortly after delivering the supplies, presumably to return to whatever base of operations he maintained nearby. Its absence made their departure easier, though the approaching night brought its own challenges for navigation. As they boarded the small craft, Jinbe took the helm while Frankie made final adjustments to the engine. Nami reviewed her charts one last time, plotting the optimal course to the suspected islet, and Luffy. Luffy vibrated with barely contained energy, eager for action after the day's necessary patience. Ready? Jinbe asked, his powerful hands confident on the controls. Let's go break a weather machine. Luffy grinned, eyes gleaming with anticipation. The Mini Mary slipped silently from the dock, its minimal wake barely disturbing the unnaturally calm waters of the harbor. Ahead lay the narrow passage through the cliffs and beyond that, the raging storm barrier that had isolated Greenstone Island. Their small craft seemed impossibly vulnerable against such elemental fury, but determination drove them forward. None of them noticed the small bird perched on a nearby rooftop, its eyes following their departure with unusual focus before taking wing toward the open sea beyond. The storm boundary hit them like a physical wall. One moment they were in the relative calm of the harbor exit, and the next, the Mini Mary bucked violently as massive waves crashed over its bow. Rain lashed horizontally, stinging their faces and limiting visibility to mere yards. This is even worse than when we arrived. Nami shouted over the howling wind, clinging to the railing as the small craft pitched dangerously. The pattern has intensified. Jinbe didn't waste breath responding, his entire being focused on reading the water's movements. His fishman karate techniques created small zones of calm around the vessel, just enough to prevent them from being swamped immediately. Even so, they shipped water with every wave. Frankie. Luffy called. Can the Mini Mary handle this? She's tough, but not built for these conditions, the shipwright replied, alternating between adjusting the engine output and bailing water. We need to find a way through this wall quickly or we'll founder. Nami squinted through the deluge, her navigator's instinct searching for patterns in the chaos. There, she suddenly pointed. 2 o'clock. The wave sequence is different, slightly less chaotic. Jinbe immediately adjusted their heading, trusting her observation without question. Sure enough, as they altered course, the violence of the storm lessened marginally, still dangerous but no longer immediately life-threatening. It's like a current in the storm itself, Jinbe observed, sensing the subtle differences. A channeled path of lesser resistance. Exactly what you'd expect if someone needed regular access through their own barrier, Nami agreed. They'd create a hidden passage, not obvious enough for ordinary ships to detect, but navigable if you know what to look for. Like a secret door, Luffy simplified, grinning despite being soaked to the skin. Smart. They followed this subtle channel, fighting for every yard of progress. The Mini Mary proved remarkably resilient, its smaller size actually becoming an advantage as it rode the waves rather than fighting them directly. After 20 grueling minutes, they detected another change, a gradual lessening of the storm's fury. We're approaching the outer boundary, Jinbe announced, his sensitivity to water currents giving him insights the others lacked. Prepare for rapid transition. The warning proved necessary. Just as the storm boundary had hit them like a wall when entering, exiting produced a similarly jarring effect. The Mini Mary suddenly shot forward as the opposing winds disappeared, causing Luffy to tumble backward into Frankie. Whoa! Luffy laughed, righting himself. That was like being spit out. Beyond the storm barrier, conditions were surprisingly calm, not natural calm, but the artificial stillness that comes after intense weather systems. The sky remained cloudy but without the violent lightning and impossible cloud formations they'd seen earlier. Most importantly, visibility extended for miles. There, Nami pointed to the northwest, where a dark shape rose from the sea. That must be the islet Tashigi mentioned. The formation wasn't large, barely a quarter-mile across at its widest, but its rocky profile rose significantly above sea level, providing a stable platform. As they drew closer, they could make out unnatural shapes atop the highest point, metal structures that had no place on an uninhabited rock. Bingo, Frankie declared, adjusting his sunglasses despite the darkness. That's definitely some kind of broadcast equipment. They approached cautiously, cutting the Mini Mary's engine and using the minimal current to drift the final distance. The islet had no proper shore, just jumbled rocks rising directly from the water. Jinbe guided them to the least treacherous landing spot, where they secured the small craft and began their ascent. The climb was challenging but manageable, especially for individuals of their physical capabilities. Near the summit, they paused, taking cover behind a large boulder to survey what lay ahead. The installation was more substantial than it had appeared from a distance. A circular platform had been constructed at the islet's highest point, supporting what looked like a cross between a weather station and a broadcasting tower. The central element was a crystalline structure suspiciously similar to a smaller version of the singing stones they'd seen in the resonance chamber. They harvested a piece, Nami whispered, horrified at the desecration. That's how they're creating the resonance pattern, they're using the stone's own material against itself. Extremely clever, Frankie admitted grudgingly. The same frequency but phase shifted to create destructive interference. 4 Marines patrolled the platform, while a 5th, apparently a technician, monitored equipment housed in a small shelter. The entire installation was surprisingly compact but obviously effective. No sign of Kurikiba, Luffy noted, scanning the area. Just regular Marines. He wouldn't need to be here constantly, Jinbe reasoned. Once established, the system would run with minimal supervision. So what's the plan? Frankie asked. Smash and grab, or something more subtle. Luffy's instinct, of course, was for the direct approach, defeat the guards and destroy the equipment. But even he recognized the value of Nami's counter-suggestion, modifying the device rather than destroying it outright. If we can reverse the phase of the broadcast, she explained, we could potentially neutralize the storm effect without alerting Kurikiba immediately. He might think the system malfunctioned naturally. Buying time for Greenstone to prepare defenses or evacuate supplies, Jinbe nodded approvingly. Tactically sound. But we still need to deal with the guards, Luffy pointed out, impatient but restraining himself. Leave that to me, Jinbe offered. I can create a distraction that will draw them away without raising immediate alarms. The plan was simple but effective. Jinbe would use his fishman karate to create unusual water patterns off the opposite side of the islet, strange enough to warrant investigation but not so threatening as to trigger emergency protocols. While the Marines investigated, Franky and Nami would access the equipment and make the necessary modifications. Luffy, despite chafing at being given the least active role, would remain in reserve in case additional force became necessary. Jinbe disappeared around the islet's perimeter, moving with surprising stealth for someone of his size. Minutes later, they heard startled shouts from the marine guards as geysers of water erupted in complex patterns offshore. As hoped, the display drew all but one guard away from the platform, the remaining sentry more focused on the spectacle than on watching his immediate surroundings. Now, Franky whispered, and he and Nami slipped forward, using the rocky terrain for cover as they approached the platform from behind. The lone guard never saw what hit him. Franky's mechanical hand, extended to twice its normal length, delivered a precise tap to the back of the Marine's head, rendering him unconscious before he could make a sound. They quickly secured and hid him behind equipment cases before turning their attention to the broadcast apparatus. Fascinating, Nami murmured, examining the crystalline component. They've somehow amplified the natural resonance using these surrounding conductors. The power source is here, Franky identified, pointing to a humming generator. And the phase control must be this component with the calibration dials. They worked quickly, Franky's mechanical expertise complementing Nami's weather science knowledge. The system was sophisticated but, once understood, relatively straightforward to modify. By reversing key connections and recalibrating the phase relationship, they could transform the disruptive broadcast into a cancellation signal. Almost done, Nami whispered, making final adjustments. This should, well. What have we here? The smooth, cultured voice froze them in place. Slowly, they turned to find Admiral Kurikiba standing at the edge of the platform, hands casually clasped behind his back. He was alone, showing no apparent concern about confronting them without backup. Straw Hat Pirates, he continued conversationally. I thought I sensed interesting visitors at Greenstone. Though I expected your captain to lead the charge, not hide in the shadows. I'm not hiding, came Luffy's voice as he vaulted onto the platform, landing in a ready stance between Kurikiba and his crewmates. Just letting my friends work. Ah, there you are, Kurikiba smiled thinly. Monkey D. Luffy. Your reputation precedes you, though I must say, sneaking around seems beneath someone of your direct approach. We're not sneaking, Luffy countered. We're stopping you from starving innocent people with your fake storms. Kurikiba raised an eyebrow. Fake. I prefer engineered. And they serve an important purpose, maintaining order in regions prone to pirate influence. By replacing pirate influence with marine control, Jinbe stated, appearing at the opposite side of the platform. His diversion complete, he'd return just in time. Precisely, Kurikiba agreed without shame. The world government cannot allow strategic resources like the singing stones to remain unprotected, especially in this age of power vacuums left by falling emperors. The stones belong to Greenstone's people, Nami argued, stepping forward. You have no right to control them. Rights? Kurikiba laughed softly. In this world, power determines rights. Whitebeard understood that, he simply chose to use his power benevolently. A philosophical choice, not a moral imperative. Luffy's patience, never his strongest quality, finally evaporated. Enough talking. Turn off your machine and leave Greenstone alone. Or what? Kurikiba asked mildly. You'll fight an admiral. Many have tried, few have succeeded. I've beaten admirals before, Luffy stated with simple confidence. So I've heard, Kurikiba acknowledged. But you haven't faced me, or my particular abilities. There was something in his tone that triggered warning signals for both Jinbe and Nami. They exchanged quick glances, recognizing the familiar pattern of a devil fruit user about to reveal their power. Frankie, Jinbe said quietly. Complete the modifications. Nami, assist him. Understanding immediately, they turned back to the equipment while Jinbe moved to flank Luffy, presenting a united front against the admiral. Kurikiba observed these maneuvers with apparent amusement. Very organized. But ultimately futile. He slowly raised one hand, palm upward. Allow me to demonstrate why I was promoted to admiral after the recent reorganization. The air around his outstretched hand seemed to waver, like heat rising from hot pavement. Then, without warning, Luffy staggered backward as if struck, though Kurikiba hadn't moved. What the? Luffy looked down at his body in confusion. He stretched his arm to grab a nearby railing, except his arm didn't stretch. It moved normally, like any non-rubber limb. Surprised? Kurikiba's smile widened. The no-null fruit grants me a rather useful ability, the power to temporarily negate other devil fruit powers within my sphere of influence. The implications hit all of them simultaneously. Luffy without his rubber abilities. Jinbe potentially weakened if the negation affected his fishman karate, which while not a devil fruit power, operated on similar energy principles. A dampening field, Frankie muttered, his scientist's mind immediately grasping the concept. He's suppressing the sea prism energy that powers devil fruits. Precisely, Kurikiba nodded approvingly. Though it has limitations, range, duration, specificity, it's particularly effective against opponents who rely heavily on their fruits. Luffy looked down at his ordinary human hands, flexing them experimentally. Then, to everyone's surprise, he grinned. Is that all? I don't need my rubber powers to kick your ass. The declaration clearly wasn't what Kurikiba expected. Most devil fruit users, suddenly deprived of abilities they'd relied on for years, would be disoriented, vulnerable. Luffy simply shifted his stance, dropping into a more grounded fighting position. Your confidence is admirable, if misplaced, Kurikiba commented. I should mention I'm also quite proficient in Rokushiki and both forms of Haki. Good, Luffy replied, cracking his knuckles. Then it'll be a fair fight. Without the ability to stretch, Luffy's opening move was a surprisingly conventional charge, but his speed remained exceptional, devil fruit or not. He crossed the platform faster than most eyes could track, aiming a devastating punch at Kurikiba's midsection. The admiral sidestepped with minimal movement, his mastery of the Rokushiki technique paper body, Kami-e, allowing him to flow around attacks with liquid grace. His counter was equally efficient, a precisely aimed finger pistol, Shurgan, that would have punctured Luffy's shoulder had the pirate not twisted away at the last moment. You've trained without relying solely on your fruit, Kurikiba observed, genuine surprise in his voice. Impressive. Rayleigh beat this lesson into me, Luffy replied, circling warily. Devil fruit powers are a tool, not a crutch. The next exchange was blindingly fast, Luffy attacking with combinations that would have made a champion boxer proud, Kurikiba responding with textbook Rokushiki techniques. Neither landed a clean hit, but Kurikiba maintained a slight advantage through superior reach and position. Meanwhile, Frankie and Nami worked frantically on the broadcast equipment, their task now even more urgent. Jinbe stood guard, ready to intervene if Luffy needed assistance, but aware that his fishman karate might be compromised within Kurikiba's negation field. Almost there, Frankie muttered, connecting a final set of wires. If this works, the phase reversal should. A sudden shockwave knocked them all backwards as something within the equipment overloaded. Sparks erupted from control panels, and the crystalline component at the center began vibrating at an alarming frequency. Sabotage protection, Nami realized, scrambling back to her feet. He booby-trapped it. On the other side of the platform, Luffy had managed to land a glancing blow to Kurikiba's jaw, an achievement considering the Admiral's skill, but not enough to significantly impact the fight. Both combatants paused at the equipment's dramatic failure. "Did you think I wouldn't anticipate interference?" Kurikiba asked mildly. "The system is designed to self-destruct rather than be compromised. Unfortunately for Greenstone, the default failure state is maximum storm intensity." He glanced toward the island, where the already violent weather was visibly worsening. "They have perhaps hours before conditions become genuinely life-threatening." Luffy's expression darkened with genuine anger, not the hot-blooded rage of his younger days, but something colder and more focused. "You'd kill everyone on that island just to make a point?" "They still have a choice," Kurikiba replied. "Accept marine protection and evacuation, or face the consequences of their stubborn independence." "There's another choice," Luffy said quietly. "I beat you, and you call off your attack." Kurikiba laughed. "And how do you propose to do that without your devil fruit powers?" "You're strong, Straw Hat, but," the Admiral's words cut off abruptly as Luffy vanished from his position, reappearing instantly within Kurikiba's guard. The move wasn't rubber-based speed, it was advanced application of observation haki, allowing Luffy to move faster than perception. "I trained for 2 years to fight without relying on my fruit," Luffy said, his fist connecting solidly with Kurikiba's sternum. "How long have you trained to fight without relying on yours?" The question hit as hard as the punch. Kurikiba staggered backward, genuine surprise showing on his face for the first time. His negation field wavered momentarily as his concentration broke. That instant was all Luffy needed. As his rubber properties returned, he immediately stretched his arm back. Gum Gum Pistol. The extended punch caught Kurikiba squarely in the face, sending the Admiral tumbling across the platform. He recovered quickly, blood trickling from a split lip, his eyes now showing genuine focus rather than casual confidence. "So the stories about you weren't exaggerated after all," he acknowledged, wiping the blood away. "But neither are mine." Kurikiba's form blurred as he executed a perfect shave, Soru, disappearing and reappearing directly behind Luffy. His hand, now coated in black armament haki, drove toward Luffy's spine. Iron body, finger pistol. Luffy twisted impossibly, his rubber body bending in ways no normal human could achieve, letting the attack pass harmlessly by. The negation field had apparently dropped completely as Kurikiba focused on offensive techniques instead. "Guys!" Luffy called to his crew without taking his eyes off his opponent. "Fix the machine. I'll keep him busy." Frankie and Nami immediately returned to the damaged equipment, assessing what could be salvaged. The central crystalline component was still intact, though now vibrating with dangerous intensity. "We can't repair it conventionally," Frankie determined after a quick inspection. "The control systems are fried. But maybe." His eyes lit up with sudden inspiration. "Nami. What if we use the crystal itself as a direct resonator, without the electronic controls? Like an acoustic instrument instead of an electric one," Nami caught on immediately. "If we could match the exact frequency of the singing stones manually. We'd need something to strike it at precisely the right rhythm," Frankie continued, already modifying parts from his own mechanical body to create a makeshift apparatus. While they worked, the battle between Luffy and Kurikiba escalated to new heights. Both fighters had abandoned any pretense of restraint, unleashing their full arsenals of techniques. The small islet trembled under the force of their clashes, rocks cracking and falling into the sea below. Luffy, now fully accessing his rubber abilities again, combined them seamlessly with advanced haki applications. His Gum Gum Red Hawk sent flames spiraling toward the Admiral, who countered with a haki-enhanced Tempest Kick, Rankyaku, that split the attack down the middle. "You're stronger than I anticipated," Kurikiba acknowledged, reasserting his negation field to force Luffy back into conventional fighting. "But ultimately, this is futile. Even if you defeat me, the storm system is now locked in escalation mode. Without the proper resonance codes, which only I possess, Greenstone Island will be destroyed. There's always another way, Luffy replied, adapting once again to fighting without his devil fruit. He charged forward, engaging Kurikiba in close-quarters combat where the Admiral's range advantage was minimized. Meanwhile, Jinbe had joined Frankie and Nami, contributing his unique sensitivity to vibrations. The crystal wants to harmonize, he observed, placing his palm against the vibrating stone. It's fighting against the disruptive pattern it was forced into. Can you feel what frequency it's trying to reach? Nami asked urgently. Jinbe closed his eyes, concentrating deeply. Yes, it's seeking a specific resonance, like calling to like across the water. Then help it, Frankie suggested. Use your fishman karate to amplify the natural frequency rather than the imposed one. It was a gamble, but with the storm intensifying by the minute, they had few alternatives. Jinbe assumed a stance rarely seen outside Fishman Island, a technique typically used for communication with large sea creatures across vast distances. Thousand brick fist, resonant wave, he intoned, striking the crystal with precisely controlled force. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The crystal's vibration changed tone, shifting from a discordant buzz to a pure, singing note. The same note they'd heard briefly in the resonance chamber when the stones had momentarily aligned. Across the water, visible even through the intensifying storm, lights flickered in Greenstone's resonance chamber as the singing stones responded to the call of their severed fragment. Kurikiba, distracted by the sudden change, glanced toward the equipment. That momentary lapse in attention was all Luffy needed. He drove forward, landing a devastating combination that sent the Admiral skidding across the platform. Your control is breaking, Luffy observed, pressing his advantage. Just like your plan. Fury flashed across Kurikiba's normally composed features. Enough games. His negation field expanded suddenly, covering the entire platform, nullifying not just Luffy's powers but affecting the resonating crystal as well. Its song faltered, threatening to revert to chaos. But something unexpected happened. Instead of stopping completely, the crystal's vibration continued, maintained now by something beyond devil fruit energy, the natural resonance between fragments of the same original stone, a connection that existed on a fundamental level Kurikiba couldn't suppress. Impossible, the Admiral whispered, genuinely shaken. The nullification should stop all energy manipulation. You can't nullify nature itself, Jinbe replied calmly, maintaining his stance despite the pressure of the negation field. Some connections exist beyond devil fruit powers. The crystal's song strengthened, cutting through the howling wind and crash of waves. Across the water, the storm began to change, not disappearing instantly, but shifting, losing its unnatural patterns and reverting to more predictable behavior. Kurikiba's composure finally cracked completely. Stop this immediately. He commanded, abandoning his fight with Luffy to charge toward the equipment. You have no idea what you're interfering with. Luffy intercepted him, rubber powers or not. Your fight is with me, he stated firmly, blocking the Admiral's path. You understand nothing, Kurikiba snarled, his cultured facade falling away. Those stones are strategic assets that could change the balance of power in the New World. The world government cannot allow them to remain uncontrolled, especially with pirates like you seeking to replace Whitebeard's influence. That's where you're wrong, Luffy replied, his voice steady despite the physical strain of holding back an admiral. I'm not trying to replace anyone. I just don't like bullies who use hunger as a weapon. The simplicity of the statement seemed to infuriate Kurikiba further. With a wordless cry of rage, he launched a barrage of attacks, each powerful enough to shatter stone. Luffy met them head-on, matching the Admiral blow for blow despite the negation of his devil fruit abilities. As they fought, the crystal's song grew stronger, the connection with Greenstone's singing stones stabilizing into a harmonious whole. The unnatural storm began dissipating rapidly, replaced by normal weather patterns appropriate to the season and region. It's working. Nami called excitedly, monitoring the atmospheric conditions. The weather is normalizing. Kurikiba, seeing his carefully constructed plan unraveling, made a desperate gambit. Disengaging from Luffy, he executed a perfect moonwalk, Jeppo, launching himself into the air and then driving downward toward the crystal itself, his Haki-enhanced hand poised to shatter it completely. "If I can't control it, no one will," he declared. Luffy reacted instinctively. Despite still being within the negation field, he hurled himself into Kurikiba's path, taking the full force of the Admiral's attack. The impact sent him crashing into the platform's edge, blood spurting from a wound in his shoulder. "Luffy," his crewmates cried in alarm. But their captain was already rising, his expression determined despite the injury. "Is that all you've got?" he taunted, spitting blood. "I've taken worse hits from training dummies." The provocation worked. Kurikiba abandoned his attempt to destroy the crystal, refocusing on Luffy with cold fury. "You will not interfere with world government operations, pirate. The age of emperors protecting territories is over. The Navy will establish order in these seas." "You keep talking about order," Luffy replied, circling warily. "But all I see is you hurting people who never did anything to you." Their clash resumed with even greater intensity, the entire islet shaking under the force of their exchanges. Kurikiba's technical mastery was flawless, each Rokushiki technique executed with textbook precision, his Haki application methodical and controlled. But Luffy fought with something the Admiral lacked, heart and adaptability, shifting between conventional fighting and rubber-enhanced attacks as the negation field fluctuated with Kurikiba's concentration. Meanwhile, the crystal continued its harmonious song, the connection with Greenstone strengthening by the minute. The storm had nearly dissipated now, revealing a night sky filled with stars and a clear path to the island. "We've done it," Frankie announced, securing the crystal in its new configuration. "The natural resonance is self-sustaining now. Even if the equipment fails completely, the harmonic pattern is established. And Greenstone's elders can reinforce it from their end through the resonance chamber," Nami added. "Kurikiba's weapon has become their shield." The Admiral heard this exchange, his face contorting with rage and disbelief. "Impossible. My calculations were perfect. The disruptive pattern should have been irreversible without the proper codes." "You calculated wrong," Luffy stated simply, landing another solid hit that rocked the Admiral back. "You thought these rocks were just tools. But they're alive somehow, connected to the island and its people. You can't control that with machines." It wasn't a sophisticated analysis, but Luffy's intuitive understanding of the situation struck at the heart of Kurikiba's miscalculation. The Admiral had approached the singing stones as weapons to be controlled rather than entities to be harmonized with. As this realization hit, Kurikiba's concentration wavered further, his negation field collapsing entirely. Luffy immediately seized the advantage, his body snapping back into its full rubber capabilities. Gum gum. His arms stretched backward, twisting together before coating in black armament Haki. Twin Dragon Cannon. The devastating attack, combining aspects of his elephant gun with the rotational force of his hawk rifle, struck Kurikiba squarely in the chest. The Admiral flew backward, crashing through the equipment shelter and tumbling to the edge of the platform. Only a desperate grab prevented him from falling into the sea below. As he pulled himself back up, bleeding from multiple wounds, it was clear the tide had turned decisively. His uniform was tattered, his breath coming in ragged gasps, while Luffy, though injured, maintained his ready stance with unwavering determination. "This isn't over, Straw Hat," Kurikiba snarled, struggling to his feet. "You've interfered with official Navy operations. The consequences will what?" came a new voice from above. Blue flames illuminated the night as Marco descended from the sky, landing lightly on the platform's edge. "Will involve explaining to your superiors how you isolated and starved a civilian population. I imagine Fleet Admiral Akainu might support such methods, but the Gorosei might have questions when the full story reaches them." Kurikiba's eyes widened at the Phoenix's appearance. Marco the Phoenix. Another relic of Whitebeard's era meddling where you don't belong. "I go where I'm needed," Marco replied calmly. Just finished visiting some other islands that reported similar, natural disasters. Interesting how they all coincided with your promotion to Admiral. The implication was clear. Marco had been tracking Kurikiba's operations across multiple former Whitebeard territories, gathering evidence of a pattern that would be difficult to dismiss as coincidental. Kurikiba assessed the situation with the cold calculation that had served his rise through marine ranks. Outnumbered, outmaneuvered, his weapon neutralized, and now facing not just the Straw Hat captain but Whitebeard's former first mate as well, the odds had shifted decisively against him. This is a temporary setback, he declared, maintaining what dignity he could muster. The world government's interest in these territories remains. Other measures will be taken. Maybe, Luffy acknowledged with surprising diplomacy. But next time, try asking nicely instead of starving people. Kurikiba's eyes narrowed at what he perceived as mockery, but he made no further attacks. Instead, he activated a small transponder snail concealed in his coat. Prepare for immediate extraction, he commanded curtly. Within minutes, the distinctive sound of approaching marine vessels reached them, reinforcements responding to their admiral's call. Kurikiba backed toward the edge of the platform, maintaining a wary distance from both Luffy and Marco. We will meet again, Straw Hat, he promised. And next time, I'll be better prepared for your unconventional approach. Looking forward to it, Luffy grinned, seemingly genuine in his enthusiasm for a future rematch. As marine ships appeared through the now clear waters surrounding the islet, Kurikiba executed a perfect moonwalk, launching himself away from the platform and toward his approaching reinforcements. Neither Luffy nor Marco moved to prevent his escape. The immediate threat to Greenstone had been neutralized, and a protracted battle with marine forces would serve no purpose. You let him go, Marco observed, not questioning the decision but noting it. We beat him and fixed the weather, Luffy shrugged. That's what we came to do. He turned to his crewmates with a bright smile. Great job with the singing rock. Frankie gave a thumbs up, while Nami and Jinbe nodded in satisfaction. The crystal continued its harmonious vibration, now settled into a stable pattern that complemented rather than disrupted the natural environment. We should return to Greenstone, Jinbe suggested, eyeing the retreating marine vessels. They may attempt to blockade the island conventionally now that their weather weapon has failed. Agreed, Marco nodded. But I don't think they'll try anything immediately. Kurikiba needs to regroup and report to his superiors. That gives Greenstone time to prepare. As they gathered to board the Mini Mary, Nami carefully disconnected the crystal from its mounting, wrapping it in protective cloth. We should return this to the resonance chamber where it belongs, she explained. It's part of their heritage. Luffy nodded approval, wincing slightly as the adrenaline of battle faded and his injuries made themselves known. Let's go tell them the good news. And maybe get something to eat. Fighting admirals makes me hungry. The return journey to Greenstone was remarkably smooth compared to their outbound trip. With the storm barrier neutralized, the waters had returned to their natural state, still challenging given the region's typically robust currents, but navigable with normal seamanship. As they approached the island, dawn was breaking over the eastern horizon, painting the green cliffs with golden light. The harbor, previously deserted save for their own vessel, now showed signs of activity as fishing boats ventured out for the first time in weeks. Word of their arrival spread quickly. By the time they docked, a crowd had gathered, Elder Tashigi at the forefront. The rest of the Straw Hat crew pushed through to meet them, relief evident on their faces. We saw the storms clearing from the resonance chamber, Robin explained as they disembarked. The singing stones suddenly aligned themselves around midnight, their harmony restored. That's when we connected with them using this, Nami revealed the wrapped crystal carefully. It belongs here, with the others. Tashigi accepted the fragment with reverence, tears glistening in her eyes. We thought it was lost forever when it was taken. To have it returned. She bowed deeply. Greenstone is in your debt, Straw Hat pirates. Luffy waved off the formality, his attention already diverted by the smell of cooking food wafting from the village. "Is that breakfast? I'm starving." The crowd laughed, tension breaking as the immediate danger passed. As they made their way up to the village, Zoro fell in beside Luffy, examining his captain's injuries with a practiced eye. "Admiral gave you trouble?" he asked casually. "Some," Luffy admitted. "His fruit can cancel other devil fruits. Made things interesting for a while." "Yet you prevailed," Marco observed, walking on Luffy's other side. "Without relying solely on your abilities." Luffy shrugged as if it were obvious. "Devil fruits are just one kind of strength." Rayleigh made sure I understood that. "Whitebeard used to say something similar," Marco commented, watching Luffy with thoughtful eyes. "That true power comes from within, not from abilities granted by external forces." At the village center, a spontaneous celebration was already forming. Despite their limited supplies, the people of Greenstone were determined to honor those who had broken the blockade. Tables were being set up, whatever food reserves remained being prepared for a communal feast. Elder Tashigi led them to the resonance chamber, where the remaining straw hats had been helping monitor the singing stones. The massive crystals now hummed with perfect harmony, their blue glow steady and welcoming rather than chaotic. "They're happy," Chopper observed with his unique sensitivity to non-human entities. "I can feel it. They were in pain before, but now they're singing together again." Tashigi carefully placed the recovered fragment near the largest stone. To everyone's amazement, it lifted from her hands, floating gently through the air until it attached itself to a broken section of the main crystal. The connection was seamless, as if it had never been separated. "The wholeness is restored," Tashigi said softly. "But Kurikiba will return, perhaps with different methods." "Probably," Luffy agreed, surprising her with his frankness. "But you'll be ready next time." "And not alone," Marco added. "I've been visiting other former Whitebeard territories. Your idea of an alliance has been well received, spreading faster than even I expected." Tashigi's eyes widened. "Truly? Others are willing to band together?" 7 islands have already committed resources and support," Marco confirmed. "Messenger birds have been exchanged, preliminary agreements drafted. What Straw Hat suggested at Flameheart is becoming reality." Luffy grinned, scratching the back of his head. "See? Told you it was a good idea." The implications weren't lost on anyone present. What had started as a simple intervention against Vargas had evolved into something far more significant, the beginnings of a coalition that could maintain the stability Whitebeard had once provided, but without dependence on a single powerful figure. As they returned to the village for the promised feast, Elder Tashigi pulled Luffy aside for a private word. "What you've done goes beyond saving us from immediate danger," she said earnestly. "You've given us a path forward, a way to protect ourselves that doesn't rely on either pirates or marines controlling our fate." Luffy's response was characteristically straightforward. "Everyone should be free to choose their own path. That's what being free means." "Whitebeard said something very similar when he first offered us his protection," Tashigi observed. "That true freedom comes from having meaningful choices, not just absence of constraint." The feast that followed was modest by usual celebration standards but joyous nonetheless. The people of Greenstone shared what they had generously, their relief at the end of their isolation evident in every interaction. Plans were already being made to send fishing vessels out for fresh catches and to re-establish trade routes with neighboring islands. As the celebration continued, Marco sought Luffy out, finding the captain contentedly stuffing his face at one of the tables. "A moment of your time," the Phoenix requested. Luffy nodded, mouth too full for words, and followed Marco to a quieter spot overlooking the harbor. Below, they could see the Thousand Sunny being prepared for departure, Frankie and Usopp loading fresh water and what supplies Greenstone could spare for their journey. "I've been watching you closely since Flameheart," Marco began without preamble. "Trying to understand what makes you different from other pirates who claim emperor status." Luffy swallowed his food. "I don't claim anything. People call me whatever they want. Exactly, Marco nodded. You don't seek titles or territories. Yet you defend both when necessary. He paused, choosing his next words carefully. When Whitebeard died, many expected his territories to be divided among the remaining emperors. Instead, they've languished in a dangerous limbo, until now. I'm not taking over Whitebeard's islands, Luffy said firmly. That's not my dream. I know, Marco assured him. That's precisely why I'm here. You found a third path, neither conquest nor abandonment, but empowerment. Helping these islands stand on their own while connecting them through mutual support. Luffy cocked his head. Is that special? Seems obvious to me. Marco laughed, the sound genuine and somewhat surprised. That's what makes you dangerous to the world government, Straw Hat. You see clearly what others complicate. The simple solution is often the most revolutionary. Before Luffy could respond to this philosophical observation, a commotion from the harbor drew their attention. A ship was approaching, not a marine vessel, but a familiar craft with a distinctive figurehead. The Red Force, Marco identified. Red-haired Shanks. Luffy's face lit up with excitement. Shanks is here. Why? Interesting timing, Marco observed, his expression thoughtful. Perhaps news travels faster than we realized. As they made their way down to the harbor to meet the arriving vessel, the rest of the Straw Hat crew joined them, equally surprised by this unexpected development. Shanks was known to be selective about his appearances, rarely showing himself without specific purpose. The red-haired pirates docked with practiced efficiency, their captain the first to disembark. Shanks looked much as he had when Luffy last saw him, powerful, confident, with that distinctive scar across his left eye and the empty sleeve pinned at his right shoulder. Luffy! Shanks called warmly, striding forward to greet his protégé. Heard you've been making waves, literally, in this case. Shanks! Luffy responded with undisguised joy, momentarily reverting to the excited child who had idolized the red-haired captain. What are you doing here? Following interesting rumors, Shanks replied with a cryptic smile. His gaze shifted to Marco. Phoenix. Been a while. Red hair, Marco acknowledged with equal measure. Though formerly rivals as commanders of different emperor crews, there was clear respect between them. Word travels fast in the New World, Shanks explained, addressing the group at large. When multiple former Whitebeard territories suddenly start forming alliances, people notice. When those same territories overcome marine blockades and defeat a new admiral. He whistled appreciatively. Well, that gets my attention. It wasn't just us, Luffy clarified, gesturing to the villagers who had followed them down to the harbor. They did most of the work. We just helped with the admiral and his weather machine. Just helped with an admiral, Shanks repeated with amused emphasis. You make it sound like swatting a fly. He turned more serious. Kurikiba is dangerous, Luffy. His no-null fruit makes him particularly effective against other devil fruit users. The fact that you overcame that advantage is significant. The implication hung in the air. Luffy had defeated a challenge specifically designed to counter his abilities, adapting rather than relying on raw power alone. It represented growth beyond mere strength. There's something else you should know, Shanks continued. Kurikiba doesn't act entirely on Navy orders. He has connections to the 5 elders directly, operating sometimes outside standard chain of command. This revelation caused concern among the group. If Kurikiba answered to the highest levels of the world government, his actions at Greenstone weren't just overzealous enforcement but potentially part of a larger strategy. All the more reason for these islands to stand together, Marco concluded. The world government sees the power vacuum left by Whitebeard as an opportunity to extend direct control. Shanks nodded agreement. Which brings me to why I'm here. He turned to address Elder Tashigi directly. The red-haired pirates offer no formal protection or allegiance, that's not our way. But we do offer free passage through our waters for your trading vessels, and the promise that any who attack you claiming our name will answer to me personally. It wasn't protection in the traditional sense, but coming from an emperor, it represented significant support for Greenstone's independence. That is, most generous, Emperor Shanks, Tashigi responded, clearly surprised by the offer. Shanks waved off the formality. Just Shanks is fine. And it's not generosity, it's pragmatism. The balance in these seas benefits everyone except those seeking absolute control. His gaze shifted meaningfully toward Luffy. Some understand that balance requires both strength and restraint. The conversation continued as they returned to the village celebration, now energized by the arrival of the red-haired pirates. Shanks and his officers were welcomed warmly, the feast expanding to accommodate the new guests. As night fell over Greenstone, 3 pirate crews, Straw Hat, Red Hair, and Marco representing the remnants of Whitebeards, gathered around a central bonfire. The symbolism wasn't lost on observers, 3 generations of pirate power, not in conflict but in unexpected harmony. You know what this reminds me of? Shanks asked, raising his drink toward the stars. The early days, before Roger's execution, when rival crews could still share a fire without bloodshed. The calm before the great storm, Marco added nostalgically. Before the pirate era truly began. And now? Robin asked perceptively. Are we witnessing another turning point? Shanks smiled enigmatically. History rarely announces its pivotal moments until long after they've passed. But yes, I believe something significant is happening here. He looked directly at Luffy. Something even Roger didn't accomplish. What's that? Luffy asked, genuinely curious. Roger inspired thousands to seek treasure and adventure, Shanks explained. But you, Luffy, you inspire people to seek freedom in its truest form. Not just for themselves but for others. Luffy seemed embarrassed by the praise. I just do what feels right. Exactly, Shanks nodded as if Luffy had made his point for him. And that intuition, that unfailing compass toward what truly matters, is rarer than any devil fruit power. Later, as the celebration wound down, Luffy found himself standing at the edge of the village with Marco and Shanks, looking out over the now peaceful harbor where their 3 ships were docked side by side. What happens next? Luffy asked, unusually reflective. With these islands and their alliance? They grow stronger together, Marco answered. Learn from each other, protect each other. Become what Whitebeard always hoped they would be, free to choose their own destiny. And Kurikiba? Luffy pressed. He'll be back, right? Almost certainly, Shanks confirmed. Men like him don't accept defeat easily. But he'll find a very different situation when he returns. News of his failure is already spreading, and with it, courage for other islands to resist similar tactics. A comfortable silence fell between them, each lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Marco spoke, his voice carrying an unusual weight. I've been searching for something since Marineford, he admitted. Some sign that Pop's death wasn't the end of everything he built. That his way of living wouldn't die with him. The Phoenix turned to face Luffy directly. I think I've found it, though not where I expected to look. Luffy met his gaze, understanding the significance of what was being said. I'm not trying to be Whitebeard, he repeated, though without his earlier frustration. I'm just being me. That's exactly the point, Marco replied. You're not imitating him, you're reaching similar conclusions through your own path, your own heart. That's not succession, that's validation. Proof that his philosophy wasn't unique to him but represents a deeper truth about freedom and responsibility. Big words, Luffy grinned. But I think I get it. Whitebeard protected people because that's what felt right to him. I do the same. Doesn't mean I'm following his footsteps, just that we're walking toward the same thing. Shanks laughed, genuine delight in the sound. And that, right there, is why you're dangerous, Luffy. You cut through complexity to the heart of matters. He placed his hand on Luffy's shoulder. Roger had that quality too, The ability to see what truly matters amid all the noise. As dawn approached, the three pirate crews prepared to depart in different directions. The Straw Hats would continue their journey toward Laugh Tale, Shanks had his own territories to oversee, and Marco would continue visiting former Whitebeard Islands to strengthen the growing alliance. On the dock, Elder Tashigi presented each captain with a small green stone pendant, carved with the symbol of the Singing Stones. These are traditionally given to Greenstone's greatest allies, she explained. They're more than decorative, they resonate faintly with our great crystals. Should you ever need to return in haste, they will help guide you through any storms. As Luffy accepted his pendant, he noticed something unusual about the carving, unlike those given to Shanks and Marco, which bore Greenstone's traditional wave pattern. His showed a small straw hat etched above the waves. We took some creative liberty with yours, Tashigi explained with a small smile. To commemorate the beginning of something new. Boarding the Thousand Sunny, the Straw Hats made final preparations for departure. Their journey had been delayed by these unexpected adventures, but none seemed to regret the diversion. So, Nami asked as they pulled away from the dock, straight on to Laugh Tale now? Or should we expect more impromptu rescues along the way? Luffy, perched on his special seat at the figurehead, grinned back at his navigator. Both. We follow our path wherever it leads. Sometimes that's toward Laugh Tale, sometimes it's toward people who need help. Profound words from our usually simple captain, Sanji commented, lighting a fresh cigarette. You're growing wiser in your old age. I'm not old. Luffy protested indignantly. And I'm not wise either. I just know what feels right. As the Thousand Sunny sailed into the open sea, they caught a last glimpse of Greenstone Island, no longer isolated by unnatural storms but connected once again to the wider world. And floating above the resonance chamber, visible even from a distance, a small blue light pulsed in rhythm with the green pendant hanging around Luffy's neck. The adventure at Greenstone had changed something fundamental, not just for the island or the growing alliance of former Whitebeard territories, but for Luffy himself. Without seeking it, he had begun to understand a different kind of strength than mere fighting power. The strength that comes from inspiring others, from building connections rather than conquering. It wasn't the path to Pirate King that he had originally imagined, but somehow, it felt right. And for Monkey D. Luffy, that had always been guidance enough. The end. Thank you for watching this video. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video.